Chapter 132. Because of his identity as an Umbu, it only took Hyjin half a day to investigate the details of the third class of the enchantment class and confirmed that none of the four of them are perception-type ninjas. As a result, Hyjin finally made up his mind to place the laboratory in the Forest of Death. The location he finally chose is located in the dense forest in a corner of the Forest of Death. That area is very remote and belongs to the edge of the entire practice field, and very few ninjas will set foot there. Moreover, that dense forest is within the range of the enchantment node. Inside the village, once a perception-type ninja approaches that area, their perception will be affected by the nearby enchantment node, resulting in a certain degree of deviation. Outside the village, the perception of perception-type ninja will be directly shielded by the enchantment. Therefore, this place can be said to be one of the many perception blind spots in the village, but because the area is too small and it is not a strategic location, and there are no important facilities nearby, so no one cares about it. After choosing the location, Hyjin did not delay and immediately started work. In his plan, the laboratory is located more than 10 meters deep underground, so the amount of work involved in the whole project is very large. Hyjin and his shadow clone, plus the 3 generations of Kazekage puppets worked together, and it took them a whole week to complete the main structure of the laboratory. The entrance to the underground laboratory is in the tree hole of a big tree. There is a special mechanism in the tree hole. If it is accidentally touched by someone, it will immediately detonate the detonation talisman hidden in the tree hole, completely blowing up the entrance part of the ground. And the underground passage under the tree hole has also been arranged by Hyjin with several secret sealing techniques. Once an outsider breaks in, the sealing technique will be activated, and hundreds of detonation talismans hidden in the entire underground passage will explode together, blowing up the entire underground passage. After passing through the underground passage, the main part of the laboratory is reached. After that, the 3 generations of Kazekage puppets will guard the laboratory most of the time to ensure the safety of the laboratory, as well as to take away important test subjects and destroy the laboratory when a strong enemy breaks in. During the whole construction process, in order to keep it confidential, all the soil and sand excavated from the ground were sealed by Hyjin with a storage scroll, and then the 3 generations of Kazekage puppets took them to the far wilderness and discarded them. Therefore, although the construction volume of the whole project is not small, the appearance of the ground above the laboratory has not changed from beginning to end. Even if people who are familiar with this place pass by, they will not be able to see the slightest clue. After completing the main part of the laboratory, Hyjin moved the experimental equipment into the laboratory one by one. Large test benches, high-precision microscopes, large cell incubators, large nutrition tanks, large refrigerators, and so on. These were the instruments he looted from Danzo's laboratory, and they became the first batch of his personal belongings. After placing the instruments in the appropriate position, Kuroto took out his notebook and started writing and drawing. After a while, his face darkened. This laboratory is the key to whether he can climb to the peak of the shinobi world in the future, and in his huge plan, this laboratory will bear at least 60% of the research task, so a large number of experimental equipment is needed. According to his estimation, at least 20 large instruments are needed and hundreds of small instruments are needed. But at the moment, there are only 8 large instruments looted from Danzo. More than half of them are missing, and more than 90% of the small instruments are missing. All in all, it will cost at least 3 billion. After listing the missing instruments one by one, and then estimating the price, Hyjin's forehead suddenly twisted into a Chuan character. Scientific research has always been a big expense of money. If you want to produce scientific research results, you must first spend a lot of money. This is the case throughout the ages. This is also the reason why Orochimaru wanted to cooperate with Danzo, because as the village's advisory elder, only Danzo can give him enough financial support. It is obviously unrealistic to get 3 billion in a short time. So Hyjin ticked on the notebook again and selected some of the urgently needed instruments. 1 billion. After calculating the price, these urgently needed instruments add up to about 1 billion. As long as he gets 1 billion, he can buy these urgently needed instruments. Then Hyojin's huge plan can immediately start. After thinking about it, it seems that the only way to get 1 billion as soon as possible is to become a bounty ninja. After all, with Hyojin's current strength, he can easily deal with most of the bounty targets. As long as he doesn't touch those with sensitive identities or strong targets, making money is relatively easy for him. And if he wants to become a bounty ninja, Hyojin must prepare a new identity. After all, the black market has its own rules of survival. The black market generally won't accept inexplicable people, so Hyojin needs a sock puppet that can adapt to the rules of the black market. Only by making a name in the black market and winning the trust of the employer can he smoothly accept the bounty task and receive the bounty. After little thought, Hyojin took out a cloak and a mask. The cloak and mask are specially prepared by him. At first, it was only for the convenience of hiding his identity when he acts secretly in the future, but now he needs a new sock puppet, so these can be used. The cloak is black with golden lines on the edge, and inside, there is a seal personally arranged by Hyojin, which can isolate most of the detection ninjutsu. The mask is black and white, with a strange style of the Demon King drawn on it. There's also a seal inside, which can isolate a certain degree of detection ninjutsu. After putting on the cloak and mask, Hyojin's temperament changed. From afar, he looks like a god of death hiding in the darkness. What nickname should I give myself? Why don't I call myself Yama? Playing with the mask in his hand, Hyojin's mouth curled up, and he smiled. At the same time, outside a cave in the country of fire, Obsidian walked out of the twisted vortex, and Ju slowly poked his body out of the ground. Looking at the dark cave, Obsidian asked, "Is he inside?" Ju nodded. "Yes, he seems to be recuperating inside." The masked man didn't waste any more time and slowly walked into the cave. Uchiha Shinichi, who was recuperating in the cave, immediately stood up and shouted, "Who is it?" Obsidian said lightly, "It's me." Chapter 133. Uchiha Shinichi's anger at this time was not an act, because Hyojin allowed him to attack the obsidian, so he roared and rushed towards the obsidian. Whoosh, his figure flashed, and Uchiha Shinichi, who was holding the kunai, looked surprised and uncertain. Although he has already activated the Manjikyu Sharingan, he still couldn't see through the obsidian's ability, and the attack just now still passed through the obsidian's body, as if he had pounced on a mass of air. Obsidian didn't seem to mind Uchiha Shinichi's attack. He crossed his arms over his chest and said in a flat tone, "Are you still obsessed with this false world?" Uchiha Shinichi calmed down a little at this time. He knows that if he can't see through the obsidian's ability, no matter how he attacks, it will be useless. "Join us. I will create a world without regrets for you." Uchiha Shinichi snorted coldly. "Why should I believe you? You've been at Naka Shrine, right?" After a pause, Obsidian continued, "Your Manjikyu Sharingan should be able to read the hidden content on the stone tablet, and that is my goal." Uchiha Shinichi has naturally seen the content on the stone tablet of the Naka Shrine, but he has no interest in the infinite Tsukuyumi world. His Manjikyu Sharingan's abilities are protection and backtrack, which also reflects his true thoughts. Unlike Obsidian, who desires to escape from the real world, Shinichi only desires to backtrack to the moment of Kurumi's death and protect Kurumi from any harm. As for the false Tsukuyumi world, he doesn't care about it at all. Although he has promised Suijin that he will join the Akatsuki, but now that things have come to a head, he couldn't open his mouth to admit defeat to the Ibido, so he froze in place. Obsidian had already sensed Uchiha and Shinichi's hesitation, so he said, "If you've thought it through, you can come to the Rain Country to find me." With that, Obsidian did not stay any longer and turned to leave the cave. In his eyes, Uchiha Shinichi, who had betrayed Mai, had nowhere else to go. As long as he was patient, he would eventually be able to rope him into the Akatsuki. After meeting up with Ju outside the cave, Obsidian ordered, "Find Kurumi, Uchiha's corpse." Ju nodded. After leaving a shadow clone at home, Hyojin transformed into Yama and quietly left the village. Because he is an Umbu, he knows about 50 to 60% of the black markets in the Land of Fire, so he quickly came to the black market closest to the village. On the surface, this black market is disguised as an izakaya. After exchanging a common code with the boss of the black market here, Hyojin was led to a compartment. Inside the compartment, the walls were covered with all kinds of bounties. Some seemed to have been posted not long ago. There was still glue on the edges. Some of the papers were yellowed. It seems that they had been posted for a long time. Very quickly, his attention was attracted by the 4 bounties in a row. The targets of these 4 bounties are none other than the 4 members of the My Umbu team, 11, and the paper is very new. It seems that they were posted not long ago. Among them, Jishue's bounty is the highest, reaching 50 million Rio, and the bounty is also specially marked that Jishue has the rumored Manjikyu Sharingan of the Uchiha clan. The second is Hyojin's bounty is 30 million Rio. Kakashi's bounty is 25 million Rio, and Guy's bounty is still 20 million Rio. Hyojin snorted lightly. Humph, Kumo is really capable of doing anything. There is no doubt that this new bounty is Kumo's masterpiece. Jishue ranks first because of the Manjikyu Sharingan. After the defection of Uchiha Shinichi, the power of the Manjikyu Sharingan was directly displayed in front of everyone. So although the 50 million Rio bounty is exaggerated, is still worth it for Jishue. On the other hand, Hyojin's bounty has risen from 20 million Rio to 30 million Rio. Perhaps it is because he defeated Uchiha Shinichi. However, Kumo doesn't know the specific situation of the battle at that time, so they can only vaguely judge that Hyojin seems to have defeated Uchiha Shinichi, who activated Susanoo. Therefore, the bounty on Hyojin's head has been increased by 10 million Rio, from 20 million Rio to 30 million Rio. As the captain of Team 11, it is reasonable for Kakashi's bounty to be increased by 5 million Rio, but Guy seems to have been ignored by Kumo again this time, and the bounty is still the original 20 million Rio. Seeing that Hyojin's eyes are fixed on the bounty of the 4 members of Team 11, the boss rubbed his hands and said with a sneaky smile, "If you could get the heads of these 4 people, we can help you get the bounty within 3 days, and we will only take a 10% commission." Many bounty ninjas are reluctant to meet their employers in person for their own safety. After all, many of their employers are big forces like Kumo, so they need the black market to act as a middleman, and the black market can also get a service fee from them. Hyojin snorted coldly. "I don't want to provoke any of the 5 great shinobi villages. Are there any targets with high bounties that have nothing to do with any of the 5 great shinobi villages?" The boss wasn't surprised by Hyojin's request. After all, the 5 great shinobi villages are not to be trifled with. This is the most basic common sense in the shinobi world. So he immediately took out a small book from his pocket and handed it to Hyojin with a smile. "These targets have nothing to do with any of the 5 great shinobi villages. You can take a look at them slowly. There's no need to rush." While flipping through the small book, Hyojin tore off a few pages of the targets he selected. These targets are either renegade ninjas who commit crimes or bandits who wreak havoc in the area. In short, they're all targets with average strength, and there won't be any future trouble after they are eliminated. With Hyojin's strength, coupled with the information he obtained from Mai through his identity as an Umbu, in just a few months, he eradicated 3 groups of renegade ninjas, as well as bandits who pillaged the area. Leaving aside the bounty, Hyojin earned nearly 25 million Rio just from looting these renegade ninjas and bandits, plus the bounty. Even after deducting the commission from the black market, he has earned a total of 70 million Rio in the past few months. And with Hyojin's efficient completion of one bounty after another, his name of Yama has completely spread throughout the entire black market circle. Somewhere in the black market, Kakuzu, who was wearing Akatsuki's signature red cloud uniform, threw a corpse to the black market boss. The black market boss took the portrait of the bounty and compared it with the corpse, then stored the corpse in the cold storage and said with a smile, "Kake-sama, please wait a moment. The bounty will be delivered to you immediately." As one of the top bounty ninjas, Kakuzu has unparalleled prestige in the black market circle. Every time he completes a bounty task, the black market boss will advance the bounty to him, saving him the time to exchange for the bounty. Chapter 134. In the face of Kakuzu's inquiry, the boss smiled and explained, "You should have heard about it. Recently, a person named Yama appeared, and many bounty missions have been taken by him." Kakuzu was a bit suspicious. "Yama?" The black market boss laughed and said, "Yes, he is a very capable big shot. In just a few short months, he completed 7 or 8 difficult missions." Humph. Listening to the praise of the boss, Kakuzu lightly snorted. For him, all of his peers are his enemies, and those who are excellent are his enemies. It must be known that the bounty missions in the black market are not endless. A group of traitorous ninjas and bandits were cleared out, and their territory was now empty. As time passed, a new group of people would naturally come to fill in. However, this would require a certain amount of time, and even if new traitorous ninjas and bandits appeared, they would have to wait until they completely angered the local nobles and merchants. Only then would someone offer a bounty on them in the black market. Therefore, there are only so many quests. If a bounty ninja finishes all the quests in a short time, the other bounty ninjas will naturally have no work to do during this period. Seeing that Kakuzu and Yama don't seem to get along, the boss consciously shut up and no longer mentioned the topic of Yama. Kakuzu held the bounty book in his hand and thought about it. There is no doubt that the efficiency of this Yama in completing bounty missions is too exaggerated. Taking himself as an example, if he has his eyes on a group of missing nin, not to mention whether he could defeat them or not, it often takes 1 or 2 months just to find them. If his luck is bad, he might even need to look for them for several months. But this Yama actually completed 7 or 8 bounty missions in a few months, which shows that this Yama is not only strong, but his intelligence-gathering ability is also extraordinary. Kakuzu thought with certainty, behind this guy, there must be an organization. Turning his head, Kakuzu asked the boss again, "The thing I told you to pay attention to, is there any result?" The boss shook his head and said with a slightly apologetic tone, "Kaku-sama, we have inquired around according to your request, but so far we have not received any news." Kakuzu gently nodded. "Continue asking." Kakuzu didn't really understand why the godlike leader of the organization would suddenly want to find a mysterious person related to my village. Moreover, the description of the mysterious man's characteristics was vague. Based on his experience, it would be difficult to find someone with such vague information, so he did not place much hope on the black market. On Hyojin's side, sitting on a cliff, he counted his earnings while eating rice balls. Just now, he had dealt with a traitorous ninja who specialized in kidnapping rich merchants' concubines in exchange for ransom. TSK, a guy at the level of a middle ninja, actually hid so much money. How'd he do it? Is kidnapping the concubine of a rich merchant so profitable? Suijin muttered under his breath. At first, he thought it was just an inconspicuous small task, but after a simple interrogation, this traitorous ninja actually proposed to use money to redeem his life. Hyojin pretended to agree, and then followed the clues and found the small vault where the traitorous ninja hid his money. But he didn't expect that there was more than 10 million ryo hidden in the small vault. After a little thought, Hyojin understood why this traitorous ninja was able to repeatedly succeed. Rich merchants themselves, or their children, on the one hand, have strong security, so it is not easy to capture them. And on the other hand, even if they succeed, the rich merchant's family will pay a lot of money to ask for help from the major shinobi villages. But kidnapping a rich merchant's concubine is a different story. Rich merchants often, for the sake of face, would rather spend money to eliminate disasters than to cause a commotion about their concubine being kidnapped. Therefore, although this traitorous ninja only has the strength of a chunin, he has repeatedly succeeded, and after more than a decade, he has accumulated a lot of wealth. While feeling happy, Hyojin also pondered. His own strength was not the main reason why he was able to complete bounty quests so efficiently. In fact, the real primary reason is that he used his identity as an Umbu subordinate to Naruto, and used the huge intelligence network of Mai, the head of the 5 great shinobi villages in the shinobi world, so he can efficiently find the target. Secondly, The unparalleled flying speed of the Tenseigan chakra mode is also one of the reasons why he can quickly complete bounty tasks. Without these 2 points, even if he is strong, he would have to obediently spend a month or 2 to search for the target all over the shinobi world. But the number of bounty tasks is ultimately limited. At present, almost all the simple bounty tasks have been swept clean by him, and the remaining ones are either very time-consuming or involve the 5 great shinobi villages, so he needs to find a new way to make money. And this traitorous ninja, who specifically kidnaps the concubines of rich merchants, gave Hyojin an inspiration. In the shinobi world, some rich merchants can really be rich enough to rival a country. In the original story, Zabuza launched a coup in the Mist village and failed. He was recruited by Kato, a rich merchant who controlled the country of waves, and a battle of life and death broke out between him and Kakashi Shinobi. Zabuza is also an elite ninja who launched a coup in the Mist village, one of the 5 great shinobi villages, and he's also one of the 7 swordsmen, the beheading sword. This level of ninja, even if the scope is expanded to the entire shinobi world, it is also ranked. But when he was down, he had to work for Kato, which shows how exaggerated the influence and financial resources of a rich merchant like Kato are. Bang! Suddenly, a puff of white smoke appeared beside Suijin. After the white smoke dissipated, an orange cat appeared in front of Hyojin. At this time, the orange cat stretched out his front paw to Hyojin and said, "Meow, 1,000 yen, thank you." Hyojin handed the orange cat 1,000 yen with a black face, and then took a scroll from the orange cat's hand. This orange cat is not an ordinary kitten, but a ninja cat named Misato. It is Uchiha Shinichi's psychic ninja beast. In order to safely transmit messages, Hyojin also signed a psychic contract with it, so Misato became a bridge between Uchiha Shinichi and Hyojin to transmit information. It's just that this stupid cat wants money. Every time it sends a message, it has to be charged, so Hyojin can't help but complain that Uchiha Shinichi can't even deal with his own psychic ninja beast. Opening the scroll from Uchiha Shinichi, a line of words came into Hyojin's eyes. "That bastard said he is Uchiha Madara. He really thinks I'm an idiot. I told you, that bastard doesn't have a word of truth in his mouth. By the way, the partner the organization arranged for me is a mist ninja named Pipa Juzo." Chapter 135. The fact that the Obsidian used the power of the Akatsuki to find him is not surprising to Hyojin. Previously, when they fought in the root base, both sides were very restrained, but it is precisely because of this restraint that it shows the fear hidden in the hearts of both sides. For the Obsidian, the existence of this mysterious person, Hyojin, is undoubtedly a huge variable. Therefore, he can't allow this variable to continue to exist and interfere with his plan. But even if he uses the power of the Akatsuki, it will not be easy to find Hyojin. What's more, now that Hyojin has received a message from Uchiha Shinichi, he will naturally be more careful. Oh, Shinichi is really sharp sometimes. He guessed that the person the Obsidian is looking for is me. Hyojin chuckled as he put away the scroll. In the past few months, the shinobi world has not been peaceful. Because of the defection of Uchiha Shinichi, the peace negotiations between Mai and Kyumo suddenly fell into an impasse. Mai accused Kyumo of sheltering Mai's traitorous Shinichi, but Kyumo naturally denied it, claiming that they have never seen Uchiha Shinichi at all, and they have no intention of accepting Uchiha Shinichi. However, because Kyumo village sent shinobi to infiltrate the Land of Fire to support the defection of Uchiha Shinichi, their defense is weak. Not to mention, Mai doesn't believe it. Even the Rock, Sancrypsis, Mist, and other shinobi villages don't believe it. This time, Kyumo village is like a piece of yellow mud falling into their pants. Even if it's not shit, it's still shit. There are even rumors that the Uchiha clan secretly sent people to Kyumo village, trying to contact the defected Uchiha Shinichi, but no one knows what happened next. Under such circumstances, the matter of the Wind Nation's dragon vein being stolen had a very limited impact. The 3 generations were indeed very concerned about the theft of the dragon's vein, but the troubles in the village came one after another. He did not have the energy to deal with the dragon's vein at all, so the matter of the dragon's vein was put on the shelf. When Mai's attitude toward the theft of the dragon's vein was reported back to the Sand Crypsis, the upper echelons of the Sand Crypsis immediately became suspicious. Some of the upper echelons of the Sand Crypsis even suspected that Mai had stolen the dragon's vein. That was why Mai did not care about the matter. Although the shinobi world is full of changes recently, it has no effect on Hyojin. He is still working hard on his plan. In the mansion of the Mishima family, the head of the Mishima clan, Mishima Yutaro, respectfully said to a burly man dressed as a Ronin samurai with a bamboo stick in his mouth, "Mr. Yagami, the equipment you wanted has been delivered." The samurai called Yagami smiled and said, "Then bring it in." The samurai named Yagami is none other than Hyojin, who has used the body transformation technique. Inspired by the traitorous ninja who kidnapped a rich merchant's concubine, Hyojin also set his sights on the rich merchants. After a careful investigation, he found that the Mishima clan, which has a monopoly on the cloth business in the Land of Iron, is not only very rich, but the backer behind them is also not one of the 5 great shinobi villages. So he set his sights on the Mishima clan. Originally, he was also planning to kidnap 1 or 2 concubines and exchange them for some ransom. But he did not expect that just when he was about to make his move, he accidentally discovered that the concubine of the Mishima clan had an affair with the samurai hired by the Mishima clan. Moreover, this adulterous couple even plotted to poison the Mishima clan's head and seize the Mishima clan's property. After learning this news, Hyojin immediately changed his mind, and using the identity of the wandering samurai Yagami, he approached the Mishima clan's head, Mishima Yutaro. Then he exposed the affair and conspiracy between the concubine and the samurai, and in front of Mishima Yutaro, he easily killed the samurai hired by Mishima Yutaro with a large sum of money. Kuroto immediately became Mishima Yutaro's honored guest after saving his life. Coupled with his extraordinary skills, Kuroto immediately became Mishima Yutaro's guest. Although the backer behind Mishima Yutaro is not one of the 5 great shinobi villages, his business with the 5 great countries is not small, and over the years, he has accumulated a lot of contacts in the major countries. Therefore, with the help of Mishima Yutaro's contacts, Hyojin began to purchase the various experimental instruments he needs. If Hyojin went to purchase these instruments with his real identity, he would soon be noticed by some people, and the village leaders are not blind, so they will inevitably investigate him. Moreover, if he purchases these instruments through the black market, the price will be 40% to 50% higher than the normal price, and such a large purchase will easily attract the attention of others. Therefore, through the Mishima clan's contacts, Kuroto can purchase in batches in the major countries. Not only can he deceive people, but also can he reduce the cost. After the servants of the Mishima clan carefully carried the instruments into the courtyard, Hyojin hurriedly walked over. Mishima Yutaro also followed on the side, and said with a smile, "Yagami-san, you see, this filter centrifuge is the latest equipment of Cloud Village. In order to get this equipment, I used a lot of my connections." "Not bad, not bad." Hyojin nodded repeatedly, and then immediately frowned. "Hey, this isn't new, right?" Mishima Yutaro smiled and said, "Don't worry, although this equipment isn't brand new, it is at least 80% new." Hyojin also knew that it is difficult for ordinary businessmen to buy brand new equipment, even if they use their connections, so he did not blame Mishima Yutaro. After checking the other equipment one by one, Hyojin said to Mishima Yutaro with satisfaction, "Thank you so much this time." After saying that, Hyojin handed over more than 90 million yuan that he had earned these days to Mishima Yutaro. The total value of this batch of equipment, Hyojin estimated, was at least more than 100 million yuan. If he went to the black market to buy it, he would not even think about it without 130 million yuan. Therefore, Hyojin had made a lot of money by only using 90 million yuan to get this batch of equipment. After sending everyone away, Hyojin carefully sealed the equipment into the storage scroll one by one. Bang! As soon as Hyojin sealed all the equipment, Moneymaker walked out of the white smoke. Moneymaker stretched out its front paw to Hyojin and said, "Meow, 1,000 yuan, thank you." Hyojin was speechless and said, "Can't you ask Shinichi for money?" "Meow. He has already given me money." Hyojin was startled and said, "You collect money from both sides?" He had always thought that he was the only one who had to pay, but after asking this time, he found out that Uchiha Shinichi, the fool, also had to pay money to use his psychic ninja beast. The orange cat moneymaker nodded very seriously and said, "Meow. It is like this." After handing moneymaker 1,000 yuan, Hyojin took the scroll. "There's a result of looking for the mysterious man. The organization has locked onto two guys. Pipa Juzo and I are responsible for looking for a guy named Shino. It is said that this person is sneaky and has a ninja village background." Chapter 136. Hiriko. As soon as he saw this name, Hyojin's expression became solemn. In Hyojin's next big plan, Hiriko has an irreplaceable and important role. So recently, Hyojin has been inquiring about Hiriko's whereabouts. It's just that this Hiriko is a renegade ninja that might put a bounty on. So even if Hyojin used Mai's intelligence network, he still couldn't find any clues about him. Unexpectedly, the Akatsuki organization actually discovered Hiriko's whereabouts first, which is indeed somewhat out of Hyojin's expectation. Sigh. I didn't expect that just one encounter in a root base would cause such an unpredictable change in the situation. Fate is really mysterious and unpredictable. When he thought that the Akatsuki organization's actions were inadvertently caused by him, Hyojin couldn't help but sigh at the impermanence of the cause and effect of everything in the world. Soon, Hyojin put away his sigh and started thinking about the next step. Hiriko and Orochimaru were born at the same time, so the two of them more or less have some friendship. The Akatsuki organization sending Orochimaru and Sasori's group to look for Hiriko should have two reasons. First, Obsidian wants to confirm whether or not Hiriko is the mysterious person he met in the root base. Second, through Orochimaru's favor, they want to recruit Hiriko into the Akatsuki organization as Mai's traitorous ninja. It should be too late to stop it now. Hyojin propped his chin with one hand and continued to ponder, if Hiriko is recruited into the Akatsuki organization, what kind of impact will it have on me? Between each group in the Akatsuki organization, there is no subordinate relationship. Orochimaru and Sasori may mention to Uchiha Shinichi who their group's target is, but they will never report any specific information to Uchiha Shinichi. On the other hand, Uchiha and Shinichi have no reasonable reason to ask for detailed information about Hiriko. So at this time, Hyojin can no longer stop the Akatsuki from contacting Hiriko. Fortunately, Hyojin only needs Hiriko's technology. Even if Hiriko joins the Akatsuki, he still has a way to get the technology he wants. After putting away all the storage scrolls, Hyojin bid farewell to Mishima Yutaro and quietly returned to the village. As soon as he returned to the village, Hyojin went straight into the secret laboratory. The instruments he purchased this time were all carefully selected by him, and they were also the most lacking part of his current plan. Therefore, with this batch of instruments, he could already choose to start his plan. But before that, he still needs to see Orochimaru. In terms of bioengineering, Orochimaru can be regarded as one of the best experts in the shinobi world. Although Hyojin obtained the Tenseigan by activating a special gene sequence, this does not mean that Hyojin is better than Orochimaru in bioengineering. It's just that Hyojin knows some secrets that Orochimaru doesn't know. Therefore, if Hyojin wants to carry out his huge plan, Orochimaru's support is indispensable. Moreover, he also needs to confirm Hiriko's situation through Orochimaru. What he is most worried about now is not that Hiriko joined the Akatsuki organization, but rather that Hiriko refused to join the Akatsuki organization and was killed by them. If Hiriko dies in such an inexplicable way, then Hyojin's plan will have many twists and turns. Through the summoning beast One-Eyed Viper, Hyojin sent a meeting request to Orochimaru. Bang! It didn't take long for the One-Eyed Viper to appear again and spit out a scroll. Hyojin opened it and immediately murmured, "The land of Tian." There is not much information on the scroll, only a few sentences. The content is that Orochimaru asked Hyojin to meet in a secret base in the land of Tion 2 weeks later. In the blink of an eye, 2 weeks passed. Hyojin strolled in the forest of the land of Tion, leisurely as if he was just a traveler on an outing. Suddenly, a kunai shot into the open space in front of Hyojin. Hyojin stopped and said, "I'm here to see Orochimaru." A figure fell down, looked up and down at Hyojin, and then said, "Please come with me." And looking at the other party's face, Hyojin was stunned. The person in front of him turned out to be the lucky guy who successfully adapted to the first-generation cells. Why did Orochimaru defect in advance? Why did Orochimaru and Danzo become irreconcilable? Why did Danzo deliberately retaliate against Orochimaru and even purge Orochimaru's old subordinates on a large scale? These doubts that have troubled Hyojin for a long time were all solved the moment he saw Yamato. Yamato, the only one who succeeded in the first-generation cell transplantation plan, was the fuse of all things. In order to compete for him, Orochimaru and Danzo became enemies and chose to defect. Yamato looked back at Hyojin at this time and asked, "What's wrong with you?" Hyojin shook his head and restrained the strange expression on his face. Following behind Yamato, Hyojin pondered while walking. In the original space and time, Orochimaru thought that Yamato was also a failed product, but in the end, Danzo picked up a loophole. I didn't expect that in this world, Orochimaru didn't ignore Yamato. As the only one among the 60 experimental subjects who successfully integrated with the first-generation cells, Yamato's research value was unquestionable. It can be imagined that when Orochimaru and Danzo found out that Yamato successfully integrated with the first-generation cells, they must have launched an intense competition between them. And the result was also clear. Orochimaru obtained Yamato, but was forced to defect from the village. Following Yamato, Hyojin arrived in front of an underground entrance. Yamato turned to Hyojin and said, "There will be some snakes at the entrance. Don't worry. As long as you follow me, they won't attack you." Hyojin smiled and nodded. Not long after, the two passed through the dark and damp underground passage and officially entered Orochimaru's secret base. After passing through several underground corridors, Yamato led Hyojin to his secret room. Yamato stepped aside and said, "Orochimaru, Sama is inside. You can go see him yourself." Hyojin casually looked around and nodded with a smile. Along the way, Hyojin found at least 10 traps, 5 seals, and more than 20 ninjas hidden in the dark. Such a strict arrangement was obviously not the way to treat a guest. There is no doubt that Orochimaru has bad intentions towards him. But in Hyojin's view, this is also inevitable. If he wants to change from a subordinate to an equal partner, it will inevitably take some effort, not to mention that Orochimaru has never been a good person, so this scene will appear sooner or later. Chapter 137. In the secret room, Orochimaru was sitting on a chair, holding an open scroll in his hand. Seeing Hyojin come in, he said in his trademark hoarse voice, "Kuroto, I have a question." Hyojin stood quietly at the door and asked, "What question?" Orochimaru didn't rush to speak, but rolled up the scroll in his hand little by little. Under the flickering candlelight, his face flickered between light and darkness. After rolling up the scroll, Orochimaru threw it to Hyojin. Catching the scroll, Hyojin opened it and found that it was full of information about himself. The most recent information even included the fight between Team 11 and the defected Uchiha Shinichi. Hyojin smiled and said, "It seems that you have been paying attention to me." Orochimaru stuck out his tongue like a snake and licked the corner of his mouth, saying gloomily, "Your Excellence makes it impossible for me to ignore you." Hyojin said calmly, "Thank you for the compliment." Orochimaru narrowed his eyes. Hyojin's calmness made him feel a trace of fear. Compared to others, Orochimaru has a much deeper understanding of Hyojin. At least, Orochimaru knows that Hyojin currently has the Ryumyaku's Jinchuriki. After pondering for a while, Orochimaru said, "I heard that you fought with Uchiha Shinichi and defeated him?" The corner of Kuroto's mouth rose as he smiled. It's just a brief exchange. I can't deal with him. Orochimaru mentioning Uchiha Shinichi is completely within Hyojin's expectations. He even suspects that Orochimaru is already planning to seize Uchiha Shinichi's Manjikyu Sharingan. After all, in the original story, after Itachi joined the Akatsuki, Orochimaru couldn't wait to attack him. Sure enough, Orochimaru asked again, what is the ability of his Manjikyu Sharingan? Hyojin first shook his head, then deliberately exaggerated. I don't know. I only know that he is very strong. No one in the village can stop him. Even Danzo has to avoid him. Oomph. Orochimaru snorted coldly, his expression somewhat disdainful. It's just that Kuroto doesn't know whether this cold snort is disdain for Uchiha Shinichi or disdain for Danzo. Hyojin said, Orochimaru, Sama, if you want to deal with Uchiha Shinichi, I advise you to be more cautious. Hyojin still needs Orochimaru to inquire about Hiriko's information, or further, to obtain Hiriko's secret technique, so he doesn't want Orochimaru to leave the Akatsuki organization too early. Orochimaru's eyes narrowed, revealing a strange smile. How do you know that I want to deal with him? Hyojin shrugged. Just like how I know that you want to deal with my opponent, it's actually very easy to guess. Orochimaru gently raised his hand, and countless snake shadows shot out from his sleeves toward Hyojin. Whoosh! Whoosh! Hyojin didn't dodge. Instead, he pulled out the blade of grass from his waist. Then, he brandished his sword. Under the sharp sword light, all the poisonous snakes shot out from Orochimaru's sleeves were cut into several pieces and scattered on the ground, the pieces of meat twitching in a disorderly manner. Orochimaru said, It seems that you have solved the caged bird. In Orochimaru's opinion, Hyojin, as the spy he left in the village, would never dare to have a showdown with him without solving the caged bird. After all, as long as he reveals Hyojin's identity as a spy, he doesn't even need to do anything. Hyojin will die in the hands of the Hyuga clan without solving the caged bird. Holding the blade of grass, Maru. Hyojin didn't comment on Orochimaru's words. Orochimaru once again stuck out his tongue and licked his lips. You really fascinate me more and more. Let me see how many secrets are hidden in your body. After saying that, Orochimaru quickly printed and shouted, Secret technique, sealed 10,000 snakes formation. Bang! In an instant, the secret room was filled with poisonous smoke. At the same time, the hissing sound of the snake's tongue also came into Hyojin's ears from all directions. Hyojin put on the gas mask, and then quietly opened the Tenseigan under the cover of the mask. This gas mask was specially prepared by Hyojin before he set off. His methods of using poison were almost taught by Orochimaru. In the face of Orochimaru, he naturally will not guard against Orochimaru's poison. After activating the Tenseigan, the mere poisonous smoke also lost its effect of obscuring his vision. Everything in the secret room became clear at a glance in his Tenseigan. After a little look, he found the figure of Orochimaru, and then holding the blade of grass, Maru slowly walked over. Swish, swish, swish. Almost every step he took, there would be more than a dozen poisonous snakes pouncing on Hyojin from different directions, and their results were without exception. All of them were broken into several pieces, and their heads were separated from their bodies. In the past, in the face of such a dense and strange attack, Hyojin, who was inexperienced, might choose to use revolving heaven to defend. But with one fierce battle after another, whether it was victory or defeat, Hyojin, who constantly summed up the experience and lessons, his mediocre combat awareness was also rapidly improving. Seeing Hyojin approaching himself step by step, Orochimaru sneered and opened his mouth, spitting out a blade of grass from his stomach. Sword. Accompanied by the gust of wind, a sword light slashed at Hyojin. Hyojin did not dare to be careless, and quickly used the blade of grass in his hand. Maru to meet it. Clang, a sharp and harsh sound of metal clashing rang out in the almost closed secret room. Orochimaru's eyes moved to the blade of grass in Hyojin's hand. Maru wondered, blade of grass? Sword? Hyojin also took advantage of this short interval to look at the blade of grass in Orochimaru's hand. Sword. He thought to himself, this blade should be the blade of grass that killed 3 generations of Naruto, right? Sword. Clang, clang, clang. The two did not communicate, nor did they retreat. They started a close combat in the closed secret room. For a moment, the sword light flashed in the secret chamber, and all the chairs and decorations were destroyed. Even the candlesticks were cut into pieces by the sword light. The candles that were as thick as a forearm were even cut into 2 halves from the wick. As the candlestick was cut out, the secret room fell into darkness. But in the darkness, the battle continued. Boom! After a while, the secret room finally could not withstand the 2 sharp blades of grass. The destruction of the sword collapsed in a roar. Accompanied by the smoke of the collapse of the secret room, 2 figures flashed out. Glancing at Orochimaru, Hyojin smiled and said, "You have been hit by my 15 swords." Orochimaru did not care and also smiled. "You are indeed a genius of the Hyuga family. Your physical skills are really commendable, but it's almost time." Hyojin asked, "What time?" Orochimaru held the sword in one hand and put the other hand on his waist. He smiled and said, "Do you think you can block my poisonous smoke by wearing a gas mask?" Chapter 138. Although the natural energy contained in Ryumai chakra gives Hyojin a headache, it also brings him an unexpected self-healing ability, making him immune to many minor toxins. As long as he doesn't inhale a large amount of it through his respiratory tract, even a highly toxic concocted by Orochimaru can't do anything to him. Orochimaru's expression gradually became cold, and after a while, he frowned slightly. Hyojin saw this and said lightly, "Did you feel it? This is a paralytic toxin I synthesized. I hope I didn't embarrass you." Orochimaru said in a hoarse voice, "Hey, nice little thing." Orochimaru looked like he didn't care on the surface, but in fact, Hyojin's Sharingan didn't care at all. The paralytic toxin on the blade caused a lot of trouble to his body. Although it didn't achieve a complete paralysis effect, he can clearly feel that the part of his body that was hit by the sword was faintly numb. Just then, a twisted wooden stake rose from the ground and entangled Hyojin. Immediately afterward, Yamato jumped out of the shadow and jumped in front of Orochimaru, protecting Orochimaru behind him. "Orochimaru-sama, are you okay?" In Yamato's mind, Orochimaru should be able to deal with Hyojin easily. But he didn't expect that after a fierce battle, not only did Orochimaru fail to quickly take down Hyojin, but he also seemed to be injured and was faintly at a disadvantage. On the other hand, Hyojin didn't try to struggle, but carefully felt the binding effect of wood release. In terms of binding power alone, even a weakened version of wood release like Yamato is better than many elite Jonin's earth release ninjutsu, and Hyojin also felt that wood release is not only absorbing his chakra, but also has a weak suppression effect on Ryumai chakra. Is this would escape? Yamato's would escape technique that had been weakened, who knew how many times still had this type of effect. One could imagine just how powerful the exceptional talents at their peak would be if they used immortal techniques together with would escape technique. It really was incomparably troublesome just thinking about it. After a little understanding of the effect of wood release, Hyojin poured the Tenseigan chakra into the grass in his hand. On the pill, the wrist holding the sword shook lightly, and the wooden stakes that bound him were all cut off. Yamato was stunned. "This?" Hyojin curled his lips. "Your wood escape is far inferior to first generations. Leave. There's nothing for you to do here." Yamato's body contained great research value. Hyojin also valued it very much, so he didn't want to accidentally kill Yamato. Yamato wanted to cast wood release again, but this time, Orochimaru pressed his shoulder from behind. Yamato turned his head and looked at Orochimaru in confusion. "Orochimaru-sama?" Orochimaru looked at Hyojin and smiled evilly. Then, without saying a word, he dragged Yamato and disappeared into the dark tunnel. Almost at the same time, more than 20 ninjas who had been hiding in various parts of the tunnel made their move. Fire release. Earth Fire Dragon Bullet. Earth release. Earth spear thrust. Hyojin's eyes turned cold as he dodged the earth spears that were aimed at him. At the same time, from the corner of his eyes, he also noticed the raging flames that were coming at him. He used his Tenseigan to look around and found a flaw in the structure of the tunnel's rock wall. So, while he was flipping, he threw out the grass pellet. The pill accurately hit that flaw. Bang! In an instant, with a roar, the entire rock wall collapsed, just in time to block the surging fire release ninjutsu for Hyojin. As soon as the tumbling Hyojin landed on the ground, two black shadows pounced on him, accompanied by a cold light. Hyuga's camera moved to the side, avoiding the long sword in the hands of the two shadows, and his soft fists hit the two shadows like punching sandbags, sending the two shadows flying. After that, Hyojin gently dusted off the dust on his body and looked at the grass that had fallen on the ground in the distance. He gripped the pill lightly, and in a split second, the grass, as if it had a mind of its own, the pill soared into the air and landed in his hand. Rustle, with a wave of his hand, Hyojin broke through the rock wall and stepped into another underground passage. In this passage, there were two black-clothed ninjas staring at Hyojin. Their eyes were cold, and there was not a trace of fear in their expressions. Walala, at this time, a ninja in black took out a string of chains, and the sound of the chains hitting each other echoed in the quiet passage. Hyojin didn't say anything. He just waved at the ninja in black. The ninja in black holding the chain whispered, "Do it." With his order, the other three ninjas in black also launched an attack together. They were either holding a sword or a kunai, and it seemed that they were ninjas with taijutsu. Hyojin wasn't interested in entangling with them. Seeing them rushing over, he immediately used Revolving Heaven Blade. Unlike the first time he used Revolving Heaven Blade, the Revolving Heaven Blade he used this time was not only more stable, but the consumption was also far less than the first time he used Revolving Heaven Blade. The four ninjas in black were like 4 carrots thrown into a blender. In an instant, they were slashed by the blade more than a dozen times and flew out, and the weapons in their hands were not spared. They were injected with the grass of the Tenseigan chakra. Pill was cut into pieces. On the ground outside the underground base, Orochimaru crossed his arms in front of his chest and looked at the underground base with interest. Not long after, accompanied by a loud noise, the stone door at the entrance of the underground base was broken into several pieces. The rubble scattered on the ground, and a figure slowly walked out of it. Staring at Hyojin slowly walking out of the underground base, Orochimaru smiled and said, "It seems that those wastes didn't cause much trouble for you." Hyojin said calmly, "Orochimaru, continuing to cooperate is good for both of us." Orochimaru grinned and said, "Then I have to confirm whether you are qualified to cooperate with me first." Hyojin glanced at the half-destroyed underground base and said, "Isn't this enough? The previous one was just an appetizer." With a smile, Orochimaru slowly bit his finger, then quickly made a seal and shouted, "Psychic art!" Bang! As a huge white smoke surged, Hyojin felt the ground tremble slightly. At this time, a low voice came from the white smoke. "Hey, Orochimaru, remember I told you, don't casually summon me." Orochimaru's hoarse voice also came from the smoke at the right time. "This time is different. Don't worry, the sacrifice will be offered later." The smoke gradually dissipated, and a giant purple snake like a mountain appeared in front of Hyojin. Thousand Snake. Chapter 139. Looking at the mountain-like myriad snakes, Hyojin raised the grass in his hand. One slowly returned to the scabbard at his waist. Against a giant summoned beast, be it a sword, a kunai, or a senboni, their effects were very limited. Therefore, Hyojin had to change his tactics. Standing on top of Viper's head, Orochimaru still had his arms crossed in front of his chest and said with a sinister smile, "Kuroto, let me see your artificial-tailed beast." Hyojin ignored Orochimaru. Instead, he assumed a soft fist stance, and his palms were filled with blue chakra. The snake dowager looked down at Hyojin and asked Orochimaru with some displeasure, "Hey, Orochimaru, Is this the brat you want to deal with? Orochimaru said, "Don't underestimate this kid. There's a monster hidden in his body." Monster? The snake dowager snorted haughtily. Then, she twisted her body and pounced towards Hyojin like a cannonball. Boom, boom, boom. A series of deafening explosions reverberated through the dense forest. There were flying gravel, broken trees, and dust that blotted out the sky. Every time 10,000 snakes flashed, it was no less than an A-grade Earth-release ninjutsu. The earth seemed to be dancing with it, shaking ceaselessly, while the forest was ravaged by it. Rumbling noises could be heard one after another, as if the forest was howling in pain. After wreaking havoc for a while, the snake dowager finally stopped and snorted. "Orochimaru, where's the monster you were talking about?" Orochimaru's eyes scanned the messy forest, trying to find Hyojin's location. However, the smoke and dust around him interfered with his vision. His solemn expression revealed Orochimaru's current state of mind. Without a doubt, he had some doubts in his heart. He didn't know why Hyojin wanted to use soft fists to fight against Snake Dowager. This was undoubtedly very stupid. Everyone knew that the most effective way to deal with a large-scale spiritual beast was to summon a large-scale spiritual beast as well. Next would be large-scale ninjutsu. As for regular taijutsu, it was practically useless against large-scale spiritual beasts, unless the opponent's target wasn't Snake Dowager. Just then, a figure leaped out from the abdomen of the Snake Dowager and pounced straight at Orochimaru. Orochimaru's eyes narrowed into slits as he muttered, "Sure enough, they're coming for me." Hyojin, who was galloping, quickly formed hand seals and shouted, "8 trigram palm, secret art. Vacuum palm." Orochimaru was slightly stunned. He had heard of most of the soft fists of the Hyuga family. However, this was the first time he had heard of the vacuum palm that Hyojin mentioned. Hyojin, who was almost in front of him, stretched out both his hands towards Orochimaru. In an instant, Orochimaru felt an irresistible suction force pulling him towards Hyojin. The distance between the two wasn't far to begin with. In less than a breath's time, the two of them collided. Hyojin, who was already prepared, slammed his palm onto Orochimaru's chest and shouted, "Contract seal, repel." Orochimaru lowered his head in shock and saw a series of sealing techniques spreading out from Hyojin's palm. Like a spider web, it covered his chest. Bang! Before Orochimaru could react, the contract between him and Snake Dowager was cut off by the contract seal cast by Hyojin. Following that, the huge Snake Dowager turned into white smoke with a dull thud and returned to the Ryuchi Grotto. Without Snake Dowager, the two who were standing on top of the Snake Dowager fell from the sky and stood firmly on the ground. Orochimaru, who had recovered from his shock, glanced at the contract seal on his chest indifferently and said coldly, "Contract seal? Huh? It seems that you have a lot of tricks up your sleeves." For Orochimaru, it wasn't difficult to remove the contract seal. However, if he wanted to communicate with Snake Dowager again, he would have to make a trip to the Ryuchi Grotto. However, this wasn't what he was concerned about. What he really cared about was the inexplicable suction force. This feeling was exactly the same as when he encountered Pain, the leader of the Akatsuki. Hyojin was panting lightly. In order to avoid Snake Dowager's attack, he suffered a lot. If it wasn't for Rain Pull, he would have been crushed into a pile of meat by Snake Dowager. As for the Bagwazang's secret technique, Vacuum Palm, he naturally made it up. His goal was to conceal Rotation's manipulation. For this reason, he purposely assumed a soft fist stance. Before he used it, he even made a few hand seals. The reason why Hyojin did this was mainly because Orochimaru had an inexplicable desire to possess the pupil Kekii, so he couldn't reveal the Tenseigan in front of Orochimaru. Otherwise, Orochimaru would have his eyes on him. At that time, not to mention continuing to cooperate, Orochimaru might even use the Akatsuki to deal with him. Orochimaru asked, "Is that a secret technique of your Hyuga family?" Hyojin nodded, "Yes. I don't know why, but that technique reminded me of a person." After a pause, Orochimaru continued, a person with Rinnegan. Hyojin deliberately said, Rinnegan? The eyes of Sage of Six Paths? Didn't you attack him? That kind of treasure should be what you yearn for even in your dreams. Orochimaru's face sank, but he didn't say anything. Kuroto smiled and said, Let's stop here. If you continue, I won't be able to handle it. Orochimaru said coldly, I'm not willing to give up until I see your artificial-tailed beast. After that, Orochimaru said, while making hand seals, Speaking of which, after learning this technique, I haven't used it many times. This time, I will try it on you. On a big tree far away from the battlefield, Yamato was squatting on a branch with a solemn face. Next to him stood several thin figures. These children were the orange-haired Yugo, the white-haired Kimimaro, and the weak-looking Haku. Looking at the distance, Kimimaro said, We should go help Orochimaru-sama. Yamato shook his head. Orochimaru-sama said that we are not allowed to intervene. Yugo sighed. The opponent is so strong that he can fight with Orochimaru-sama to this degree. It's really incredible. Haku nodded with lingering fear. Just now, if Yamato didn't use wood release to protect them, they would have been smashed into meat paste by the snake. Kimimaro asked, Why did Orochimaru-sama's beast suddenly disappear? It was obvious that no one present could answer his question. At this time, Yamato pointed at the distant battlefield. Look! Chapter 140. Such an incomparably huge monster had far exceeded the limits of the few imps' imagination. While they were shocked, their bodies instinctively trembled. Haku asked in a trembling voice, What is that? Even Yamato, the oldest among them, couldn't answer Haku's question. This question confused him and made him feel a loss. Yugo stared at the eight-headed snake in the distance and said with uncertainty, I can feel the presence of Orochimaru-sama from that monster. What? Everyone exclaimed in surprise when they heard this. Yugo carefully sensed and confirmed there is indeed a bit of Orochimaru-sama's presence. Yugo's perception wasn't the perception ninjutsu of perception-type ninjas. It was a more primitive perception that was closer to nature. Therefore, his perception wasn't based on Chakra's attribute, but on the presence of nature. Kimimaro couldn't believe it and said, Is that Orochimaru-sama? Yamato stood up and said, Whether that is Orochimaru-sama or not, I believe that Orochimaru-sama won't be defeated. However, we should retreat further. On the battlefield, Hyojin raised his head and looked at the enormous eight-headed snake. His face darkened. Obviously, this was one of Orochimaru's strongest forbidden techniques, the Yamata no Jutsu. It was a forbidden technique that could rival the tail beast. In the original world, Orochimaru had used this technique against Itachi, but it was easily defeated by Itachi's jutsu. His whole body was even sucked into the sealed world of the jutsu. However, this didn't mean that the Yamata no Jutsu was weak. After all, Nagato, who was almost at his peak strength in the Edo Tensei state, could easily crush Naruto and Shirabai, who were both perfect Jinchuriki. However, he still couldn't resist the seal of the jutsu. Phew! After letting out a light breath, Hyojin slowly raised his hand and began to form a seal. Since he can't use the Tenseigan chakra mode to deal with Orochimaru, then he can only use the power of the dragon vein. Therefore, he converged all divergent thoughts and abandoned all thoughts that had nothing to do with fighting. As the seals were completed, he shouted in a low voice, Dragon Vein Seal, release. In a split second, the dragon vein chakra gushed out of his body. The thick chakra transformed into a purplish-green dragon that hovered above his head. One of the eight-headed serpent's head opened its mouth, revealing half of Orochimaru's body. At this time, Orochimaru looked wet, and his body was wrapped in sticky mucus like a newborn baby. He looked at Hyojin, who had opened the seal of the dragon vein, licked his lips with his slender tongue, and said in a playful tone, Tenseigan, is this the dragon vein chakra? It's really fascinating. Hyojin's expression gradually calmed down. He watched Orochimaru vigilantly while monitoring the dragon vein in his body. The biggest flaw of the artificial-tailed beast was its instability. Even the second-generation leader Naruto couldn't solve this problem, so the village sealed the artificial-tailed beast plan. Therefore, after Hyojin became the Dragon Vein's Jinchuriki, he has been using the Dragon Vein in his body as a battery and has never directly driven the Dragon Vein to fight. First, it was to cover up the Dragon Vein. Second, it was to prevent the Dragon Vein from going berserk. At this point, if Hyojin didn't use the power of the Dragon Vein, Orochimaru would be even more suspicious. As more and more Dragon Vein chakra gushed out of Hyojin's body, the purple dragon above Hyojin's head quickly expanded. Gradually, the size of the purple dragon was comparable to the size of Orochi. Under the wrapping of the Dragon Vein chakra, Hyojin's body slowly floated in the air. Driving the Dragon Vein is similar to driving the tailed beast to fight. Hyojin doesn't need to absorb the Dragon Vein chakra into his body to use ninjutsu. He only needs to order the Dragon Vein to fight on its own. So no matter how many Dragon Vein chakra erupts, he doesn't have to worry about his body being attacked by the natural energy. The only thing he needs to pay attention to is to make sure that the Dragon Vein doesn't go berserk. So, the two behemoths confronted each other from afar. Every time the purple dragon grew bigger, Orochimaru's expression became more serious. When the purple dragon was about the same size as Orochimaru's face was no longer playful. Instead, it was replaced by a look of fear. Orochimaru said coldly, "Kuroto, let me have a taste of your artificial-tailed beast." After saying that, the 8 snakeheads of Orochi rushed towards Hyojin's purple dragon like a heavy hammer. Whoosh! The 8 snakeheads, which were the size of a hill, attacked quickly and violently. Just the wind alone was comparable to several grade A wind release ninjutsu. So, accompanied by the attack of Orochi, a gust of wind suddenly blew in the forest. The wind was so strong that it uprooted a large number of trees. While floating in the air with the help of the Ryumyaka chakra, Suijin's pupils shrank slightly, and his face sank as he channeled the Ryumyaka chakra to meet Yamada no Orochi head-on. In an instant, the white body of Yamada no Orochi and the cyan-purple chakra dragon were entangled together. This was a real battle between the two monsters. The momentum was far greater than the previous raging of the 1,000 snakes in the forest. With just a few rolls, a large area of the forest was razed to the ground. Orochi entangled the purple dragon like an octopus. The 8 snakeheads bit the body of the purple dragon, and the purple dragon tore off one of the snakeheads. Puff! The snakehead immediately spat out a huge amount of blood, like blood rain, splashing into the forest. However, after a while, the snakehead that was torn off by the purple dragon grew again. At first glance, it was almost no different from before. If it wasn't for the strong smell of blood in the air, the scene of the severed head just now would have seemed like an illusion. Orochimaru smiled and said, "Kuroto, why don't you use the real body? You should have created the body of the artificial-tailed beast." Hyojin did not answer and urged the Dragon Vein with a sullen face. At the beginning of the design, Hyojin did not expect to use the Dragon Vein in battle. So, when it was shaped, the appearance of the Dragon Vein was slightly funny. This was also one of the reasons why he was reluctant to use the real body of the Dragon Vein in battle. However, the more important reason was that he did not want to damage the purple clay body of the Dragon Vein in battle, causing the Dragon Vein to go berserk. Chapter 141. One purple and one white. The two monsters chased and fought in the forest. Everywhere they went, they would set off endless smoke and stirred up the forest. Swish, swish, swish. The blue-purple dragon swept its tail, rolled up more than a dozen trees, and threw them at Orochi no Orochi. The 7 heads of Orochi no Orochi opened their bloody mouths and chewed all the trees flying towards them into pieces, and the snake head with half of Orochimaru's body in its mouth stood far away. Orochimaru, who was hiding in the mouth of the snake, had regained his playful expression at this time, as if he was going to eat Hyojin. Hyojin immediately urged the dragon vein to rush over. It was just a crisscross, and in the smoke and dust, half of the snake head flew out with blood splashing in the sky. At the moment of the crisscross, just now, the blue-purple dragon tore off a snake head, and the remaining snake head tore off a lot of chakra from the blue-purple dragon. While flying, Hyojin slightly curled his lips. Being accustomed to the free flight of the Tenseigan chakra mode, now the flight wrapped in the Rimyaka chakra is as awkward as it can be. Not only is it awkward, but in terms of speed, it is far less than the flight of the Tenseigan chakra mode, so it is more accurate to use the word flying. TSK. He entered the field he is best at. After a light sigh, Hyojin once again urged the dragon vein to fight with Orochi no Orochi. Orochimaru is best at this kind of stalemate because of the terrifying regenerative ability of Orochi no Jutsu. It is not inferior to the tailed beast in hand-to-hand combat. Therefore, if there is a lack of finishing move, no matter who it is, facing Orochimaru's Orochi no Jutsu will be a headache. The fight continued, and the entire forest was almost destroyed by the two monsters in a short period of time. As they fought, neither of them dared to be distracted. Only when he heard a weak cry for help did Hyojin notice a small figure hanging on a tree branch not far away. He looked out of the corner of his eye and saw that the small figure was a 4- or 5-year-old child with a delicate face and a thin body. Below them, Yamato used his wood release to create a shield to protect the other two children. Hyojin's figure flashed, and he flew to the tree branch, picked up the child hanging on it, and then landed in front of Yamato and the others. Yamato hurriedly stood up and shouted, "What do you want to do?" Now he knew that the boy in front of him, who was only a few years older than him, was a powerful ninja comparable to Orochimaru. Kimimaro and Yugo, who were protected by Yamato, rushed out and shouted, "Put Haku down!" Bye. Slightly startled, Hyojin threw the child in his hand to Yamato and said, "Why don't you guys hide further away?" Yamato felt helpless when he heard that. They had tried their best to avoid the two monsters, but the movement speed of the two monsters and the range of the battle were far beyond their imagination. So even though they wanted to escape long ago, they were still affected by the battle. At this time, Yamato no Orochi rushed over, and Orochimaru, who was hiding in the mouth of the snake, also noticed Yamato and the others. Hyojin said lightly, "Orochimaru, you can't do anything to me, and I can't do anything to you. Is there any need to continue such a boring battle?" Orochimaru glanced at Yamato and the others who were close to Hyojin and thought for a moment, then immediately smiled and said, "Kuroto, your artificial tailed beast really opened my eyes." Hyojin said calmly, "Orochimaru, not only did you save my life, but you also taught me. I will never forget this, so we shouldn't be enemies." Orochimaru licked his lips and said, "It seems that I'm not much worse than Jiraiya with a student like you." After saying that, Orochimaru released the Yamato no Jutsu. This time, Orochimaru felt that he had figured out the details of Hyojin. In his opinion, Hyojin indeed had the strength to cooperate with him on an equal footing, but not to the point where he could threaten him. In short, he felt that he could still control Hyojin. Seeing that Orochimaru released the Yamato no Jutsu, Hyojin quickly resealed the dragon vein into his body. In the fierce battle just now, the dragon vein was on the verge of going berserk several times. This is not to say that the dragon vein's origin is rejecting Hyojin, but because the dragon vein's chakra's amount is too large. So once the dragon vein is used without restrictions, the dragon vein will always be on the verge of going berserk. So on the surface, Hyojin looks like a real Jinchuriki, and it seems that he didn't consume much energy during the fierce battle. But in fact, he used the Tenseigan chakra in his body several times to suppress the dragon vein that was on the verge of going berserk. If the battle continues, he will definitely be the first to collapse. Looking at the messy and devastated forest and glancing at the calm Orochimaru, Hyojin couldn't help but think, to deal with Orochimaru, I really need to use Jinjutsu. The facts in front of him once again prove that to deal with Orochimaru, Jinjutsu, are time-consuming and laborious choices. Only Jinjutsu is the most effective. This also reminded Hyojin of Itachi. The biggest difference between Itachi and other Uchiha is that he will never underestimate his opponent, and he will never fight unprepared. In this regard, even Jishui is slightly inferior, because Jishui once lost one of his eyes to Danzo because of carelessness. Orochimaru walked out of the forest at this time, and as he walked, he asked casually, "You came to see me this time. There must be something important, right?" Hyojin chuckled and followed him. "There are some experimental things that I really need your help with." Looking at the two people who were fighting to death just now, and in the blink of an eye, they were talking and laughing side by side, Yamato and the other children were all stunned. Haku said with lingering fear, "I thought I was going to die just now." Yugo asked curiously, "Who is he?" Yamato introduced, "His name is Hyojin. He is a my ninja, and it seems that he is also a student of Orochimaru-sama. So he is a student of Orochimaru-sama." Kimamaro's eyes stared at Hyojin as he secretly swore in his heart, "Hyojin, one day I will definitely surpass you. Orochimaru-sama's eyes belong to me." After regaining his senses, Yamato looked at everyone and asked, "None of you are injured, right?" On Hyojin's side, after a few words, he asked, "You should have seen Hiriko recently, right?" Orochimaru immediately stopped and stared at Suijin with a piercing gaze. "How did you know?" Chapter 142. It's going to be published tomorrow, and I'm feeling really uneasy. First of all, I want to thank the readers who have been with me for the past 2 months. Thank you for your support. It's because of your support that this novel can reach where it is today, step by step. Next, I want to thank the editor, Wakaba-san. Thank you, Wakaba-san, for your support, allowing this novel to be read by more readers. Publishing is the most important step to determine whether a novel has value or not. So, I'm shamelessly asking for a round of subscriptions, begging for an initial subscription. I sincerely hope that everyone can help me make this novel more valuable, so that my efforts can be recognized and the results can be better. To be honest, I'm feeling like I'm waiting for the results of the college entrance examination. I'm worried about gains and losses, and I have a lot of things to say in my heart, but I don't know what to say. Writing. Chapter 143. Orochimaru carefully looked at Hyojin for a while, seemingly judging something, and finally turned his head and said, "Not long ago, Hiriko also joined my organization." Hyojin pretended to be casual. "I didn't expect him to join as well." Orochimaru snorted lightly. "He doesn't have the right to choose, and it's not a bad thing for him." After thinking for a while, Hyojin tentatively asked, "Orochimaru-sama, I heard that Hiriko has mastered a very practical taboo jutsu. Is this rumor true?" Glancing at Hyojin, Orochimaru said with great interest, "So, this is what you're interested in? Heh, I really can't hide anything from you." Since Orochimaru has seen through him, Hyojin no longer concealed it and said bluntly, "Yes, I'm very interested in his taboo jutsu." Orochimaru stopped and looked into the distance, as if he was recalling something. After a while, he slowly said, "Hiriko is my peer. I'm sure you already know this. His aptitude is the most mediocre among his peers, so the taboo jutsu he developed is a kind of taboo jutsu that can plunder other people's Kekkei Genkai. That kind of thing shouldn't be attractive to geniuses like you." To some extent, Orochimaru and Hiriko are the same kind of people. But compared to Hiriko, who is mediocre and often ignored, Orochimaru has a very high talent in ninjutsu. Later, Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Orochimaru were selected by the Three Generations Naruto and became the direct disciples of the Three Generations Naruto. And Hiriko, who was a close friend of Orochimaru during their school days, eventually drifted away from them. But even the extremely talented Orochimaru, after reaching his current realm, is aware of the insurmountable gap between a ninja, without Kekkei Genkai and a ninja with Kekkei Genkai. That was why Orochimaru was so obsessed with the forbidden technique that he single-handedly developed the undead reincarnation that allowed him to plunder other people's bodies in Kekkei Genkai. At the same time, he also began to understand Hiriko's ambition and struggle hidden beneath his humble and lowly heart. Every time he was praised as a genius by true geniuses, Hyojin would feel a little uncomfortable. He smiled and said, "I feel that his forbidden art has great potential." Orochimaru collected his thoughts and asked, "You want the technique of Onigiri?" Hyojin nodded lightly. Although he had a casual smile on his face, his eyes were abnormally firm. He needed the Gue Yero technique. This was his opportunity to become a god. That spell is only half finished. No one's body can withstand that kind of burden. After a pause, Orochimaru chuckled and said, "If anyone's body can withstand that kind of burden, then he wouldn't need this kind of nondescript technique." Regarding Orochimaru's evaluation, Hyojin agreed with half of it, while the other half didn't agree. With Hiriko's crude method, it is true that no one's body can withstand the burden of fusion. Even if Hiriko transformed his body, he still ended up looking like neither a human nor a ghost. Therefore, on this point, Orochimaru's evaluation is pertinent. But Orochimaru obviously underestimated Hiriko's talent. Hiriko may not have the talent to become a ninja, but he is definitely not inferior to Orochimaru in terms of scientific research. In Kuroto's memory, Hiriko had successfully absorbed 4 types of Kekkei, using the Chimara technique. Although he had failed at the last step and failed to absorb Kakashi, but with 4 types of Kekkei, his combat power was already above ordinary Kage ranks. The elites of the Umbu couldn't even resist a single move from him, and an elite Jonin like Kakashi, who can become a candidate for Naruto, can't do anything to him. Thinking of this, Hyojin asked, what if he solved the problem of the burden on his body? Orochimaru replied in an unusually positive tone. All forbidden arts have their limits. He won't be able to complete the last step. Hyojin thought to himself, yes, but who would have thought that he would use the power of celestial phenomenon to complete the last step with the help of the Golden Ring solar eclipse? Hyojin has already felt that Orochimaru doesn't care much about the technique of Onigiri. Of course, there are some flaws in the technique of Onigiri, but more than that, it may be because of Orochimaru's arrogance. Perhaps in Orochimaru's mind, Hiriko will always be a head lower than him, a nobody that he has left far behind. But Hyojin knows that Hiriko is a scientific research genius that is not inferior to Orochimaru. Just like Orochimaru, what he lacks is broadening his horizons. Taking the Onigiri technique as an example, the brutal fusion can indeed achieve the goal of plundering the opponent's bloodline to a certain extent, but it is only a fusion of quantity. Even if you pay the price of transforming your body into a monster, it only accumulates quantity, but there is no qualitative improvement. This is also the reason why Hiriko, who has fused 4 types of Kekkei Genkai, lost to Naruto. His Hell Release is effective against ordinary ninjas, but once he encounters a powerful ninjutsu like the Helix Shuriken, it immediately shows its weakness. And in the shinobi world, there are many techniques that are more powerful than the Helix Shuriken. Without a qualitative improvement, once you encounter an extraordinarily powerful enemy, not to mention 4 types of Kekkei Genkai, even 4 types of Kekkei Genkai would be useless. But it is undeniable that Hiriko's original intention of creating the Onigiri technique was a genius idea. From this idea, Hyojin got an inspiration. The most magical thing about the Onigiri technique is that it can be fused with Kekkei Genkai. In other words, it can be fused with the chakra attribute, but its weakness is that the fusion is too rough and too brutal. For any living creature, the fusion between the body and the soul is of utmost importance. Just like the Edo Tensei, with different sacrifices, the strength of the ninja after the Edo Tensei is completely different. This is also the reason why during the 4th Shinobi World War, the 4 Naruto shinobi, who used the White Zetsu's clone as a sacrifice, were able to display close to their peak strength. But the Onagiri technique not only destroys the fusion between the body and the soul, but also destroys the balance of the body itself, which is why even if Hiriko fused 4 types of Kekkei Genkai, he still couldn't obtain a qualitative improvement. Hyojin, on the other hand, thought of a way to circumvent this weakness of the Onagiri technique. Since the fusion method of the Guei-Yero technique was too crude, then he would use cloning technology to clone a clone that was completely compatible with him. Then, he would use the Guei-Yero technique to fuse these clones that originally belonged to him. This way, he could avoid the flaw of the Guei-Yero technique. Therefore, Hyojin had to build a huge laboratory for this purpose. He needed to create a water escape clone, a fire escape clone, an earth escape clone, a wind escape clone, a lightning escape clone, and a yang escape clone that represented a celestial body. Chapter 144. This road will be extremely difficult, but in order to reach the pinnacle, Hyojin has no regrets. Even if there are many difficulties and obstacles on the road, he will overcome them and walk to the end. So, Kuroda pondered for a moment and asked, Orochimaru, Sama, can you help me get the Chimera technique? Orochimaru's indifferent attitude towards the Chimera technique is a good thing for Kuroda. The more Orochimaru doesn't care about the Chimera technique, the lower the cost for Kuroda to obtain the Chimera technique. Orochimaru seems to have a plan and said with a smile, I can help you get this technique, but what can you do for me? Hyojin's brows wrinkled slightly, and he suddenly had a bad premonition in his heart. Orochimaru said meaningfully, I heard that the genius of the Uchiha clan, Uchiha Jishue, has also awakened a Manjikyu Sharingan, and he's a companion of your Anbu squad. You want to seize Jishue's Manjikyu Sharingan? Hyojin was a little surprised. He thought that the person Orochimaru wanted him to help deal with is Uchiha Shinichi, but he never thought that Orochimaru is targeting another Manjikyu Sharingan possessor. Orochimaru didn't deny it, and just raised the corner of his mouth, revealing an evil smile. In an instant, the scene of Orochimaru having his will modified by Kotoeme Tsukumi and then becoming a loyal dog of Konoha flashed in Suijin's mind. And then the scene of Orochimaru becoming a loyal dog of Konoha flashed in his mind. After driving this absurd scene out of his mind, Hyojin said helplessly, Orochimaru, Sama, I advise you to dispel this idea. Orochimaru didn't get angry, but asked casually why. I know the strength of Uchiha Jishue better than anyone. Even if the two of us join forces, we are not his opponent. After a pause, Hyojin smiled bitterly and said, I advise you to give up. I just don't want to accompany you to death. In order to enhance his persuasiveness, Hyojin briefly described Jishue's performance in the conflict between Cloud Village and Mai. Of course, he also counted part of his achievements to Jishue. Anyway, in front of 3 generations, Jishue admitted it. Even if Orochimaru has other spies in the village, the information he found will not be different from what Hyojin said. After listening to Hyojin's words, Orochimaru didn't show any surprise. Obviously, he has done a detailed investigation on Jishue, and he has more or less heard some of Jishue's achievements, but not as detailed as Hyojin said. Seeing Orochimaru silent, Hyojin said, once Uchiha and others awaken their Manjikyu Sharingan, they will not be so easy to deal with. So before you make a move, it is better to investigate their Manjikyu Sharingan ability first, otherwise. Suijin deliberately stopped halfway through his words. There's no need to make things too clear when talking to a smart person. Orochimaru didn't feel depressed at all. Instead, like a snake that has found its prey, his eyes showed a heart-palpitating fanaticism. His slender tongue licked around his lips and smiled grimly. Kuroda, are you looking down on me? Hyojin smiled bitterly and shook his head. Orochimaru obviously didn't take Hyojin's persuasion to heart. Or in other words, with his obsession with Kekkei Genkai, he won't take anyone's persuasion to heart. Whether it is Jishue or Shinichi, one of them must have become his target. But it is also ridiculous to say that Orochimaru's target is precisely Uchiha. who restrains him the most. Whether it is Jishuei or Shinichi, they are first-class Genjutsu masters, coupled with the Manjikyu Sharingan. Orochimaru is no different from Itachi. Moreover, compared to Itachi, who is more restrained, Jishuei, who has Kodo Tsukumi, and Shinichi, who can use Susanoo, are obviously more dangerous. Hyojin knows the truth of moderation, so he didn't waste any more words to persuade Orochimaru. In his opinion, Orochimaru won't change his mind without suffering some hardships. Not long after, Hyojin followed Orochimaru to another secret base. After rummaging through the database, Orochimaru took out a scroll and threw it to Hyojin. Hyojin spread out the scroll and took a closer look and found that the scroll recorded the information he needed most about cell cultivation and cell cloning. Quickly putting away the scroll, Hyojin sincerely thanked Kuroto. "Thank you very much." Orochimaru didn't care too much and said in a hoarse voice, "If you want to do living experiments, supporting equipment is essential, but I won't prepare these for you. How can I let you worry about the equipment?" With a smile, Hyojin asked again, "What about the Chimera technique?" Orochimaru looked at Hyojin and said with an evil smile, "When you investigate the ability of Uchiha Jishuei's Manjikyu Sharingan, come to me again." Hyojin pondered for a moment, then nodded. At present, Kuroto is not sure whether Hiriko has developed the Chimera technique to its limit or not. After all, when Hiriko tried to complete the last step of fusion in the original space-time continuum, it was almost 15 years later. God knows to what extent Hiriko would have perfected the technique of Chimera in the past 15 years. So even if Kuroto managed to obtain the current version of the technique of Chimera, as Orochimaru said, it would only be a semi-finished product that can't even be used. Therefore, Kuroto is not too anxious to obtain the Chimera technique. The main purpose of his visit to Orochimaru this time is to obtain the information about human cloning and to confirm whether Hiriko is alive or dead, and he has achieved both of these purposes. But before leaving, Hyojin suddenly had a new idea. So he said to Orochimaru, "Those children from before, they don't seem to be simple." Orochimaru squinted his eyes and glanced at Hyojin. Among those children, except for Haku, they are all his exclusive objects, and he will never share them with others. Hyojin smiled and said, "The child named Haku, I think he is very interesting. I want to take him back to the village. I hope you can allow me to do so." Orochimaru was startled. He seemed a little surprised that Hyojin chose Haku. Among the four of them, Yamato, Yugo, Kimimaro, and Haku, the most inconspicuous one is undoubtedly Haku. So Orochimaru thought that Hyojin would choose one of the three, but he didn't expect that Hyojin would choose Haku. Orochimaru knows that Hyojin will not speak without thinking. So he thought to himself, "Is there something special about Haku that I haven't discovered?" Chapter 145. Hyojin was walking slowly in the forest, followed by a thin man. Haku's bright eyes glanced at Sujin's back from time to time, and after a few hesitations, he finally mustered up the courage to ask in a low voice, "Kuroto-sama, where are you taking me?" At this moment, Hyojin's mind was full of the next step of the experiment, so he casually replied, "My village." Haku lowered his head and murmured, "My village." Haku didn't have any concept of my village. He couldn't even imagine what my village was like, so he was a little anxious at the moment. Sensing Haku's anxiety, Hyojin smiled and said, "Don't be afraid. You won't be in danger." Haku asked weakly, Can I still see Yugo and the others?" Although they haven't been together for a long time, Haku has become friends with Yugo and Kimimaro, who are the same age as him. So, he was at a loss to leave his friends. Kuroto rubbed Haku's head gently, then looked into the distance and said a little absent-mindedly, "If everything goes well, maybe you will be able to see them again in a few months." They didn't spend too much time on the road. Hyojin led Haku back to the village, but he didn't take Haku back to his home. Instead, he placed Haku in the secret laboratory that Orochimaru had left for him. The equipment in the secret laboratory has been transferred by Hyojin to his own laboratory, so with a little modification, it became an underground residence. As a shinobi village, Mai's interrogation of outsiders is very strict. Even children are no exception, not to mention that Haku isn't an ordinary child. He has the ice-release Kekiai Jinkai. So if Hyojin directly brought Haku back to his home, once it was discovered, Hyojin would be in trouble. After settling Haku down, Hyojin first went back to his home and recalled the shadow clone that was left at home. Through the memories passed back by the shadow clone, Hyojin learned that nothing major happened in the village during this time, but is said that the peace negotiations with Cloud Village that have been deadlocked for more than half a year seem to have made some progress recently. In addition, the Uchiha clan seemed to be secretly searching for the whereabouts of Uchiha Shinichi. As for their purpose of doing so, the rumors had yet to come to a conclusion. Bang! At that moment, white smoke suddenly rose from the house. Then, an orange lucky pill appeared in front of Hyojin. The moneymaker pill licked its paw leisurely. Meow, 1,000 yuan. Thank you. Hyojin immediately paid and took the scroll. For some reason, Uchiha and Shinichi had not contacted him recently, which made him feel a little uneasy. Now that he had received a message, he was slightly relieved. After opening the scroll, a line of words was reflected in Kuroto's eyes. The guy called Shino is really good at hiding. It took me more than a month to catch him. Do you know what his true identity is? Oh, you may not believe it, but that guy turned out to be the leader of the Konoha village. You can't believe it. I used Jinjutsu to torture his secret. That guy actually wanted to make an artificial-tailed beast and then counterattack my... Haha, that's ridiculous. Who would want to make an artificial-tailed beast? Hyojin took a deep breath as he put away the scroll and said to himself, Don't be angry. Don't be angry. This guy's a psychopath. I won't lower myself to his level. Every time Uchiha Shinichi sends a message, he looks like a chatterbox, but he is actually not like that. Every time he sends a message, he says a lot of things, not only to convey the news of the Akatsuki to Hyojin, but also to vent his own repressed emotions. In the Akatsuki, he disguised himself all the time and couldn't tell anyone the truth. So, sending messages to Hyojin became the only way for him to speak freely. After dealing with the trivial matters, Hyojin came to his secret laboratory. As soon as he entered the laboratory, the 3 generations of Kazekage puppets greeted him, Master. Since the laboratory was built, the 3 generations of Kazekage puppets were left in a laboratory by Hyojin to guard the place 24 hours a day, so even if he is not in the village, the safety of the laboratory is guaranteed. Outside the Forest of Death, my Jonin Mizuki said to the 3 people around him, You 3 listen carefully, this task is not easy. If you are not careful, you will lose your life. Gaima held his head with his hands and muttered with a blade of grass in his mouth. What? Isn't it just driving a wild boar? What's the big deal? Xinz, who had 2 braided braids, also said, Teacher Shuei Wiyue, you underestimate us too much. It's just a wild boar. Do you think it can kill us? Without saying a word, Itachi studied the map of the Forest of Death carefully. Shuei Wiyue held his forehead with one hand and said with a slight headache, Didn't I tell you earlier? That's not an ordinary wild boar. It's a ninja pig. Ninja pig. When he first saw the mission description, Shuei Wuyue did not pay much attention to it. He thought it was just a simple mission to train the tacit understanding between team members, but after asking around, he found out that this mission was not simple. An extremely powerful wild boar appeared in the Forest of Death at some point in time. It quickly became the overlord of the Forest of Death and severely affected the ecological balance in the forest. One must know that the Forest of Death is not an ordinary forest, but an actual combat exercise ground that might specially operated to imitate the ecology of the wild. So if the wild boar continues to wreak havoc, the Forest of Death will soon no longer be suitable as a combat ground for Genin. Seeing that Tian Ma and Xinz didn't seem to care, Shuei Wuyue shook his head helplessly and said, Let's go. In his opinion, although this mission is a bit tricky, he is a Jonin after all. No matter how powerful the ninja pig is, the team should not have any accidents. Moreover, There was an outstanding junior like Itachi in the team. In the secret laboratory, Hyojin stared at the two large nutrition tanks and sighed silently. In each of the two large nutrition tanks, there is a deformed clone soaked in a nutrient solution. These two clones were an attempt made by Hyojin before he went to see Orochimaru. However, just by looking at their distorted and deformed appearance, it is obvious that the two clones have completely failed. Hyojin quickly adjusted his state of mind, took out the experiment records, and checked them line by line. Failure is not terrible, but if you can't learn from failure, then it is too terrible. So Hyojin must figure out what went wrong in this attempt. At this time, the laboratory slightly shook. Chapter 146. Clang, clang, several shurikens, accompanied by a gust of wind, flew straight at the wild boar. However, after hitting the body of the wild boar, the shurikens bounced off with a metallic sound. It was as if what was shot was not a wild boar, but a lump of iron. Roar! The wild boar blew hot air from its nose and let out an angry growl. There is no doubt that although the shurikens didn't hurt the wild boar, they annoyed it. Tenma saw that the situation was not right and said, Hey, this guy's skin is too hard. The leader of the Jonin team, leader Minutsuki, quickly shouted, Be careful, it's coming. As soon as Minutsuki's voice fell, the wild boar rushed towards the team of four. Its momentum was so fierce that it even set off smoke and dust along the way, like a speeding train. Fire release. Great fireball technique. At this moment, Itachi used the fire release ninjutsu passed down in his family. Whoosh! The huge fireball instantly drowned the wild boar. But before everyone could breathe a sigh of relief, a huge black shadow came out of the flames and rushed straight at them. The leader of the Jonin team, leader Minutsuki, held Shinko and flashed to a big tree, while Itachi also pulled the stunned Tenma to hide to the side. Bang! The wild boar that failed to hit the target hit a big tree, and with a muffled sound, the big tree fell to the ground. Looking at the big tree that 2 or 3 people couldn't even hug with their arms open, and it was hit by the wild boar, not to mention Tenma and Shinko. Even the leader of the Jonin team, leader Minutsuki, was surprised. Shinko's teeth chattered, and she said, Sensei, let's go back first. Tenma also echoed, This is not a wild boar. It's simply a monster. The wild boar that had just knocked down a big tree shook its head, and its long nose sprayed hot air again. Then it aimed at Itachi and Tenma, who had fallen on the ground, and rushed over again. Itachi opened his Sharingan and shouted, Jinjutsu! As Itachi cast the Jinjutsu, the wild boar in the collision staggered a few steps and then fell to the ground. Shinko saw this, jumped down from the tree, and cheered, Wow! As expected of Itachi. Shueiwa also landed beside Itachi and patted his shoulder. Good job. Just as the few of them were celebrating the completion of the mission, the wild boar that had fainted not too long ago stood up unsteadily and pounced on the defenseless group again. Oh no, everyone be careful. By the time Itachi noticed the wild boar charging at him, the wild boar was already within reach. The leader of the Jonin team, Kuroto Minazuki, turned around and was immediately startled. At this time, it was too late for him to do anything else, so he could only open his arms to protect the students behind him. Tian Ma's face was filled with fear, while Xinz closed her eyes in fear. Swoosh! Suddenly, a crisp whistle came from the forest. When the wild boar heard the whistle, it stopped and turned its head to look in the direction of the whistle. At this moment, a figure slowly walked out of the forest. Itachi looked in the direction of the voice and exclaimed in surprise, Senior Jing. The figure that came out of the forest was none other than Hyojin. He put his hands in his pockets and walked over leisurely, his eyes looking back and forth at the wild boar. Seeing that it was Hyojin, the wild boar intimately leaned over. Looking at the wild boar that has exceeded 2 meters in height, Hyojin said in amazement, No way. I haven't seen you for only half a year. How did you grow so big? The last time he saw the wild boar, it was only up to Hyojin's waist, but now it is taller than Hyojin. Itachi walked over and asked, Kuroto-senpai, Is this ninja boar your ninja beast? Hyojin was a little startled and immediately smiled and said, kind of. Itachi suddenly understood. No wonder it is so powerful. It turns out to be your ninja beast. Itachi's team leader Sui Wuyue also came over and said with a smile, My name is Sui Wuyue. I am Itachi's team leader. It was really thanks to you just now. Hyojin asked Sui Wuyue why he fought with the wild boar, and after learning that the wild boar has become a tyrant in the Forest of Death, seriously destroying the ecological balance of the Forest of Death, Hyojin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Hyojin didn't expect that his casual actions at the beginning would cultivate such an arrogant ninja boar. After pondering for a while, Hyojin said to Sui Wuyue, You can rest assured I will drive it out of the Forest of Death. This wild boar obviously can't stay in the Forest of Death. Otherwise, there will be my ninjas coming to drive it away every 2 or 3 days, and then Hyojin's experiment won't be able to continue. After sending away Sui Wuyue's team, Hyojin walked around the wild boar. To be honest, the potential of this wild boar is somewhat beyond his expectations. He is now very curious about the extent to which this wild boar can grow in the future, so he decided to sign a contract with this wild boar and accept it as a summoned beast. Perhaps because of the residual Tenseigan chakra in its body, the wild boar didn't resist Hyojin at all and smoothly became his summoned beast. After receiving the wild boar as a summoned beast, Hyojin sent it out of the Forest of Death. Right now, he didn't have the energy to train this wild boar bit by bit, so he directly sent the wild boar to the endless forest of the Country of Fire, letting the wild boar grow freely. As for how far it could grow in the future, it was up to the heavens. After dealing with the matter of the wild boar, Hyojin immediately returned to the laboratory. The failure of the first cloning attempt made him understand that he is still a novice in the field of cloning, so he didn't rush to clone again. Instead, he studied the cloning technology he got from Orochimaru while reviewing the various mistakes he made in his first attempt. Perhaps because of the development of the undead reincarnation forbidden technique, Orochimaru has an extremely deep accumulation in anatomy, human structure, organ transplantation, and so on. Just by flipping through the scroll he got from Orochimaru, Hyojin learned a lot. Soon, with the in-depth study, he began to realize that he made a lot of low-level mistakes in his first attempt, many of which were fatal enough to lead to the failure of the cloning. So, while summarizing the previous mistakes, Hyojin began to plan the next step of the experiment. With the current equipment in his laboratory, he can barely try the cloning experiment of the water clone. The reason why he chose to clone the water clone is because the water clone is the most stable type of clone. At the same time, it is also the one with the highest theoretical success rate among the 6 types of clones. The other 4 types, such as the fire clone, thunder clone, earth clone, and wind clone, either require additional equipment or their state is unstable, so the success rate is not high. As for the yang clone that represents the immortal body, at the moment, Hyojin doesn't even have a clue. Chapter 147. In Hyojin's experiment plan, the main part of the water clone was still his own cells. However, the cells had to be filtered through a few machines to remove the chakra attribute. Then, 1% of Bai cells would be added. Bai possessed the ice escape blood inheritance. Therefore, the chakra attribute in Bai cells was mainly water escape, followed by wind escape. Once the Haku cell tissue is injected into the clone body, it can be used to change the chakra attribute of the entire clone body to the water attribute with the help of the high concentration of water release chakra contained in the Haku cell tissue. There were 2 difficulties in the entire plan. Firstly, how to filter out the Ein attribute chakra in his own cells. Secondly, how to solve the rejection reaction after Bai cells were injected into the clone. Hyojin could not do much about the first difficulty. He could only filter the Ein attribute chakra through advanced equipment, such as the centrifuge. If the number of filtrations was not enough, the Ein attribute chakra would be left in the cells. If the number of filtrations was too high, the activity of the cells would be greatly reduced. Nobody could tell Hyojin how to control the degree of filtration. He could only confirm it through experiments. As for the second difficulty, he could only rely on luck. After all, there is a certain degree of uncertainty in the rejection reaction. Sometimes it would be strong, and sometimes it would be weak. As the experiment plan was perfected step by step, Hyunjin's water clone was activated immediately. First, he placed his own cell tissues in 100 small petri dishes. Then, he filtered them one by one with different steps and intensity through a centrifuge filter. This step was painstaking work. Hyunjin only managed to complete it after 3 days of hard work. Eventually, out of the 100 small petri dishes, only 6 of them had the Yin attribute chakra completely removed. Meanwhile, the rest of the cells either had the Yin attribute chakra or had completely lost their activity. Hence, they were no longer suitable for cloning. After observing the final 6 petri dishes through a high-precision microscope, Hyunjin realized that the cells in the 6 petri dishes were more or less damaged. However, the damage was still within the acceptable range. Subsequently, Hyunjin extracted a portion of the cells from Bai's body. The ice escape bloodline limit was the product of the fusion of the water chakra and the wind chakra. In other words, Haku's ancestor must have been a powerful ninja who had developed water release to the extreme and fused it with wind release. This ninja's ability to fuse water attribute chakra and wind attribute chakra was deeply engraved in his genes, passed down from generation to generation, and finally formed Haku's ice release bloodline clan. Therefore, although Haku is still just a skinny child, the water attribute chakra contained in his cells is extraordinary. At least ordinary water attribute ninjas are far inferior to him. After injecting the same amount of Byakugan cell tissue into the 6 petri dishes, Kuroda quietly waited for the results. After a while, a cell tissue in a petri dish lost its vitality due to rejection. Hyunjin looked indifferent and removed it from the large petri dish. The rejection was already expected, so his mood did not fluctuate too much, calmly observing the situation in the other 5 petri dishes. Soon, the other petri dishes also showed rejection. 2 more petri dishes lost their vitality and were removed by Hyunjin from the large petri dish, while the remaining 3 petri dishes survived. Among the 6 petri dishes, the cell tissue in 3 petri dishes survived the rejection. This nearly 50% survival rate surprised Hyunjin. Hey, why is the survival rate so much higher than expected? It's really strange. Is it because my cell tissue is more compatible with Haku's cell tissue? There are many factors that affect the rejection, and Hyunjin could not determine for a while what caused this. Then, among the 3 petri dishes, the cell tissue in 1 petri dish had a mutation phenomenon. The main body of the cell tissue changed from Hyunjin's cell tissue to Haku's cell tissue. The reason for this phenomenon is that Hyunjin's cell tissue was in a damaged state after being filtered by centrifuges and other instruments, so Haku's cell tissue took over. After eliminating the petri dish with the mutation phenomenon, Hyunjin only had 2 petri dishes left in his hands. It happened that there were only 2 large nutrient tanks in his laboratory, so he put the cell tissue in the 2 petri dishes into the 2 large nutrient tanks and, at the same time, began to accelerate the growth of the clone body. Normal cultivation in the large nutrient tank. Even if you don't mind excessive consumption of expensive nutrient solution, it takes at least 3 months to accelerate the growth of a clone body. This is something that neither Danzo nor Orochimaru can change. But Hyunjin is different. With the Tenseigan, he can use the Tenseigan chakra and nutrient solution to accelerate the growth of the clone body. Not only can it enhance the strength of the clone body, but it can also greatly improve the growth speed of the clone body. As long as Hyunjin is willing to spend the nutrient solution, he can even complete the growth process in 1 month, which normally takes 3 months. Time flew by, and a month quickly passed. For a whole month, except for occasionally visiting Haku and using the Tenseigan to record the movement of chakra in Haku's body when he used ice release, Hyunjin spent most of his time in the laboratory. As for the task of Umbu Team 11, he handed it over to the Shadow Clone. Fortunately, during this period, there weren't many tasks for Team 11, and most of them were just patrol tasks, so he didn't expose himself. And through the information collected by the Shadow Clone, he came to a conclusion that the final negotiation between the village and Kumo should be in the near future. After all, even if my Kumo have a lot of assets, they can't support a military confrontation for such a long time. Whether it's war or peace, there must be a result. After a month of rapid growth, Hyojin's 2 clones have been completed. Through the glass of the large nutrient tank, Kuroto looked at the 2 clones that are almost identical to himself in the nutrient tank, and his originally calm state of mind gradually became a little turbulent. After calming down, Hyojin took the 2 clones out of the nutrient solution and placed them on the test bench. Hyojin first checked the physical functions of the 2 clones, and after confirming that their physical functions are normal, he gently opened the eyelids of the 2 clones, and immediately, 2 pairs of white eyes appeared in front of him. Chapter 148. There were 4,400 subscriptions in 24 hours. Now, the first chapter has already been subscribed to 4,700. This result has far exceeded my expectations. I really didn't expect everyone to be so supportive. From the looks of it, I'm the one who's not supportive. Actually, I had already written 3 chapters yesterday. However, because I felt that the plot was a little dragging, I had to revise and edit it, so I only published 2 chapters. Everyone's enthusiasm made me a little fearful, so I didn't want to and didn't dare to make a meaningless plot. Coupled with the fact that I'm not fast at writing, I only published 2 chapters yesterday. Here, I still have to apologize to everyone. There are too many unrealistic promises that I can't fulfill, so I might as well not say anymore. I'll strive to evolve from a beast of 2 chapters to a beast of 3 chapters. Finally, thank you again for your support. Every achievement of this book has a part of your contribution. Also, thank the students who have rewarded me after it was published. Passerby A. Sorrow, You Loser, Book Friend 20171008191157951. Ebook Wine. Call back later. At 1,000 Years of Dream _Soulless. Star, E. Haichin, Reisman, The Recorder of Resistance, 9 Calamity Dreams. Book Friend 20170708063041835. Lu Augu, Flashy Life in a Flash. Daddy woke up naturally from a deep sleep. A tree on the moon, a single leaf obscuring one's eyes. Howl super fierce. Book Friend 20170632122022184. Looking for 1,000 times in the crowd. Taishami Luo, Book Friend 20180808072029689. Book Friend 20181010121414744. A Locust Tree, Elegant and Noble. Thank you. Chapter 149. On the test bench, the eyes and the eye sockets of the 2 clones are indeed white Byakugan. From the appearance alone, there's almost no difference from the Byakugan of the Hyuga clan. But for Hyojin, who has the Tenseigan, he can clearly feel that these 2 pairs of Byakugan are semi-finished products. Kuroto is not surprised by this. With the emergence of the forbidden techniques related to the soul, such as Undead Demon Seal, Edo Tensei, and so on, in a shinobi world, whether the soul exists or not is no longer a topic that needs to be discussed. Although the soul often appears in the form of chakra, there is no doubt that the soul is not completely equivalent to chakra. In Hyojin's view, chakra is only a carrier that carries the soul, and the real component of the soul should be a unique spiritual symbol. What the clones on the test bench lack is the unique spiritual symbol. Therefore, without exception, the Byakugan and the eye sockets of the 2 clones are semi-finished products. They lack the spiritual symbol and are a bunch of cell tissues that are close to the real Byakugan. Therefore, the value of this semi-finished Byakugan is very limited, and it is obviously impossible to use them to make a giant Tenseigan. Because the giant Tenseigan requires a complete Byakugan, and the Byakugan on these two clones are only semi-finished products, not real Byakugan. In fact, this is also reasonable. If cloning alone can perfectly replicate everything, then Orochimaru wouldn't need to worry about Jishui and Shinichi, the two possessors of the Manjikyu Sharingan. Hyojin's expression was calm as he recorded the experiment, and there was not much disappointment on his face. For others, these two clones may not be of much use, but for Hyojin, who has the Tenseigan, this kind of soulless body is exactly what he needs the most. In the previous control of the 3 generations of Kazekage puppets, Hyojin accidentally discovered that his consciousness can temporarily occupy the bodies of the 3 generations of Kazekage puppets. This discovery made him suddenly realize that his Tenseigan has a very magical ability. In his memory, Nieren seemed to have this ability as well. He once temporarily transferred his soul to a puppet and went to Earth to send an invitation to Hinata. After being discovered by Naruto, he extracted his soul and abandoned the puppet. To some extent, this ability of Tenseigan is somewhat similar to the forbidden technique, undead reincarnation, developed by Orochimaru. It's just that the Tenseigan can easily activate this ability. Not only can it transfer the soul to other puppets or bodies, but it can also extract the soul at any time, unlike Orochimaru's undead reincarnation, which is restricted by many harsh conditions. Because of this, Hyojin came up with the idea of cloning 6 perfect clones and then using the genius Oniyero technique to fuse them into one. Otherwise, without the Tenseigan soul descent, relying on the current cloning technology alone, it's impossible to create a perfect clone that matches the soul in a true sense. After recording the physical indicators of the 2 clones one by one, Hyojin carefully compared them and found that the physical indicators of the 2 clones are relatively similar. There's no obvious difference in strength between them. After pondering for a while, Hyojin labeled the 2 clones as Type A and Type B. Then he sat cross-legged on the side, facing the test bench, and used the Tenseigan soul descent technique to put his soul into the Type A clone body. In an instant, the naked Type A clone lying on the test bench opened its eyes. Clone A sat up and opened its mouth as if it wanted to say something. However, all that came out of its mouth was a yeah sound. After a while, it said in a strange tone, "It's really, really awkward." Without a doubt, the one occupying the Type A clone body was Hyojin's soul. In other words, the Type A clone body had become Hyojin. Getting down from the test bench, Hyojin staggered a few steps before he managed to stabilize himself. At this moment, it was as if he was wearing clothes that did not fit his body or shoes that did not fit his feet. Every part of his body felt awkward, and it was even difficult for him to speak and walk. After getting used to it for a while, Hyojin put on a robe and muttered, "The data on paper is indeed not as detailed as what I can feel with my own body when my soul descends." After putting on a robe, he slowly walked to the mirror and opened his eyes wide, carefully looking at the appearance of his eyes in the mirror. From the outside, there did not seem to be any changes, but he had a feeling that the Byakugan in his eye sockets was no longer the half-finished product from before. "Byakugan open!" With a low shout, the meridians at the corner of Hyojin's eyes immediately swelled, and his vision changed, entering the vision of the real Byakugan. Is it because of the soul descending? Perhaps it was because of Hyojin's soul descending. The Byakugan in the Type A clone's eye sockets were no longer the half-finished product from before, but the real Byakugan. In order to verify his guess, Hyojin hurriedly walked to the front of his main body and gently opened his eyelids. He was surprised to find that the Tenseigan in his main body's eye sockets had returned to the Byakugan state. Before he performed the soul descending, he had clearly activated the Tenseigan. Stroking his chin, Hyojin pondered, "Even my main body can't maintain the Tenseigan after losing my soul? Then is my Tenseigan my soul or my eyes?" In order to answer his doubts, he quickly used the Type A clone body to conduct an experiment. After some hard work, he discovered that the Type A clone body was unable to activate the Tenseigan, nor was it able to use Rain Pull, let alone enter the Tenseigan chakra mode. As for the golden wheel reincarnation explosion and silver wheel reincarnation explosion, which are the ultimate skills of the Tenseigan chakra mode, there is no need to even mention them. There seems to be only one Tenseigan ability that can be used, and that is soul extraction. Hyojin shook his head. No wonder Naruto was able to deal with the soul descending on the puppet so easily. At this time, Hyojin had confirmed that his soul possessed the ability of the Tenseigan. However, in order to unleash the full power of the Tenseigan, he would have to merge with his main body. In other words, the soul and the body were the complete Tenseigan. In the separated state, each of them had a part of the Tenseigan's ability. Chapter 150. Hyojin naturally didn't have the tendency to self-abuse. The reason why he thought so was because Uchiha Madara had taken out his Rinnegan and quietly transplanted it to the young Nagato. Although after the transplant, the Rinnegan in Nagato's body had been dormant until Nagato reached adulthood and was greatly stimulated and gradually awakened. But it was undeniable that Madara did transplant his Rinnegan to Nagato. Perhaps, when he took out the Rinnegan, he also gave up part of his soul. After thinking for a moment, Hyojin came to such a conclusion. There is no doubt that Madara in his later years was not ignorant of the soul. Otherwise, he wouldn't have tried to create Black Zetsu to monitor the Obito before he died, but he didn't expect that the Black Zetsu that he created by splitting a part of his soul would be occupied by another ghost that has been wandering in the shinobi world for thousands of years, playing a game of turtle dove occupying a magpie nest under his nose. Without staying too long on the Type A clone, Hyojin's soul returned to his body. Before developing the water clone, Kuroto must first deal with the dragon vein sealed in the body of his main body. After all, once his soul descends into the body of the water clone, the power of his main body won't be enough to suppress the huge amount of chakra inside the body of the water clone. It may be fine for a while, but after a long time, the dragon vein will go berserk without the suppression of Chakra's Tenseigan. This hidden danger must be dealt with first, otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. So after leaving a shadow clone in the village, he quietly sneaked out of the village, the country of demons, the palace of the Miko. Zen, Sama, you run slowly, be careful. A large group of maids was following behind a little girl, noisily. The little girl who was running in front was holding a colorful kite. She was panting as she ran. She seemed to be struggling, but her little red face was full of excitement. The guards on the side shook their heads and sighed. Obviously, this was not the first time such a scene happened. In the main hall, the Miko-sama flipped through the documents and frowned. You, what? Suddenly, a few short exclamations of surprise sounded out from the guards at the entrance of the main hall. The exclamations didn't even have the time to be loud before they stopped abruptly. Then, a figure walked into the hall. The Miko-sama's face sank and asked, "Who are you?" The figure who walked into the hall took off the mask on his face and smiled. "Your Highness, don't worry, it's me." After seeing Hyojin's face, the Miko-sama sighed with relief and immediately asked, "Hey, how did you sneak in? I've already activated the barrier, right?" Kuroto said, "In order to conceal my identity, I had no choice but to sneak in. Please forgive me, Your Highness." The enchantment laid out by Miko outside the palace is indeed no less than an iron wall for others, but it is nothing for Suijin, who has the Tenseigan. He found a small flaw in the barrier, then used the golden wheel reincarnation explosion to cut open a small hole and sneaked in without anyone noticing. The reason why he chose to sneak in is also because of his considerations. Although the country of demons is in an independent state, the infiltration of the neighboring countries has never stopped. So even in the palace of Miko-sama, there's a possibility that there are spies from other countries. Therefore, he can't meet the Miko-sama openly. The Miko-sama didn't care too much and said, "Why are you in such a hurry to see me? What's the matter?" Hyojin briefly mentioned the matter of the dragon vein to the Miko-sama, and then said, "I want to reseal the dragon vein into a magic tool, but I'm not good at this kind of seal, so I came to ask for your help." The Miko-sama wasn't too surprised. "It really is you who stole the dragon vein. All the sealing techniques on the artificial tailed bee scroll were taught by the Miko-sama to Hyojin, and the purple clay was also provided by the Miko-sama. So after hearing that the dragon vein was stolen, the Miko-sama first thought of Hyojin. Hyojin smiled and said, "I didn't expect to complete the artificial tailed beast plan so quickly. What a bold attempt." After a little sigh, the Miko-sama thought for a moment and said, "If you want to seal the huge chakra dragon vein, it's impossible for an ordinary magic tool to do so." Hyojin quickly asked, "Then what kind of magic tool can do it?" Miko-sama got up and took out a scroll from a nearby bookshelf, then slowly spread it in front of Hyojin. Hyojin's eyes were immediately attracted by the map on the scroll. The map on the scroll is a very detailed map of the land of demons. Marked on it are all the towns, villages, mountains, rivers, and lakes in the land of demons. Then, Miko-sama's finger pointed at a mountain called Mountain of Demons and said, "There's a treasure here. You just happen to be here." Hyojin looked curious. "What treasure is it?" Miko-sama smiled and said, "You'll know when you get there." After announcing to the public that she would be in seclusion to study the sealing technique, Miko-sama quietly sneaked out of the palace with Tenseigan and headed towards the Hokuto Mountain. On the way, Hyojin asked, "Your Highness, when I sneaked into your palace, I found that the security inside the palace is very tight, as if they are facing a great enemy. What exactly happened?" Miko-sama sighed helplessly. "Sigh, the cult of Yomi has risen from the dead." Hyojin's eyes narrowed, pondered for a moment, and said, "Don't worry, I will help you completely eradicate the cult of Yomi this time." Miko-sama immediately thanked him. "Then I'll leave it to you." It didn't take long for the two to arrive at the Mountain of Demons. After entering the belly of the Mountain of Demons, after walking for about a quarter of an hour, Miko-sama stopped in front of a rock wall, then made a hand seal and performed a technique on the rock wall. In an instant, a bright light flashed. The previously lifelike rock wall slowly became blurred and transparent, and finally disappeared. Hyojin's eyes narrowed slightly, thinking, Miko-sama's Fuinjutsu is really extraordinary. This camouflage technique almost fooled my Tenseigan. Miko-sama beckoned to Hyojin, "Come in." Following behind Miko-sama, Tenseigan passed through the blinding enchantment and came to a valley with a different world. Miko-sama pointed to a green vine hanging on the cliff in the distance and said with a smile, "The treasure is over there." Hyojin looked in the direction of Miko-sama's finger, but there was only an inconspicuous gourd vine and a small gourd hanging on it. Chapter 151. The Sage of Six Paths? Listening to Miko-sama's explanation, Hyojin was a little distracted. For others, the Sage of Six Paths who created the shinobi world is a mythical figure, but for Hyojin, the Sage of Six Paths is just a strong person worthy of respect. Moreover, with the memories of his past life, Kuroto knows very well that Sage of Six Paths is not dead. To be more precise, the Sage of Six Paths still exists in the shinobi world in the form of a soul, monitoring the order of the shinobi world and maintaining the peace of the shinobi world according to his own standards. This is also one of the reasons why Hyojin has been acting so cautiously, because no one knows how much strength the Sage of Six Paths still has in his soul form. In his memory, at the most critical moment of the Fourth Shinobi World War, the Sage of Six Paths appeared and divided his power to his two reincarnated sons, Naruto and Sasuke. After receiving the gift from the Sage of Six Paths, Naruto could easily save Guy who would die after opening the Eighth Gate, and Sasuke awakened a Sharingan, which allows him to play with a nine-tailed beast like a toy. Therefore, in Hyojin's view, even if the Sage of Six Paths is in his soul form, he is still the strongest person in the shinobi world. As for the artifact of the Sage of Six Paths, Hyojin recalled that during the Fourth Shinobi World War, a gourd-shaped artifact of the Six Paths appeared, and it was held by the Gold Horn and Silver Horn brothers of Cloud Village. Could it be that the gourd was also picked from this gourd vine? With this thought in mind, Hyojin walked towards the gourd vine and silently opened his Tenseigan to observe. Although the gourd vine hanging on the edge of the cliff looks very ordinary, in the vision of the Tenseigan, it contains a very strong nature energy. Following this nature energy, Hyojin searched all the way and finally found that the roots of the gourd vine penetrated deep into the ground along the crevices of the rocks. It seems that this gourd vine can absorb the nature energy from the earth vein. After discovering the strangeness of the calabash vine, Hyojin was looking forward to the small calabash on the vine. At this time, Miko-sama also came over and introduced. Our Miko-sama of the Land of Ghosts has been guarding this gourd vine. Every 30 years it will produce a gourd, and each gourd on this vine is an excellent material for making artifacts. Hyojin stared at the small gourd on the vine and asked, "When can I pick it off?" It had matured a few months ago. That's why I said you came at the right time. After a short pause, Miko-sama chuckled. If you had come a little later, I might have turned it into another artifact. Hyojin was a little hesitant. Such a precious treasure. Miko-sama interrupted Hyojin's words and said, "If you feel bad about it, consider this gourd as your reward for helping the land of demons eliminate the Yomi cult." Kuroto nodded without being pretentious. After a while, Miko-sama plucked the small gourd from the vine. The small gourd is cyan in color, and although it looks very ordinary, it can be said to be an extremely rare artifact material in the shinobi world after decades of nourishment from the earth vein. According to Hyojin's request, Miko-sama placed a sealing technique on the small gourd to strengthen the ability of the small gourd to isolate chakra, and then handed the small gourd to Hyojin. After receiving the small gourd, Hyojin tried a little bit and found that after being strengthened by the sealing technique of Miko-sama, the small gourd's ability to isolate chakra is very strong. Even his Tenseigan chakra can't penetrate the wall of the small gourd. Dragon Vein Seal Release. Hyojin no longer hesitated and quickly made a hand seal to release the seal of the dragon vein in his body. As the seal of the dragon vein was released, a gust of wind immediately blew in the valley. Miko-sama on the side knew that the dragon vein sealed in Hyojin's body was about to come out, so she quickly retreated far away and hid behind a rock wall, only poking out half of her head, wanting to see what the legendary dragon vein looked like. At this time, a purple object came out of Hyojin's body and flew into the air. There is no doubt that this purple object is the physical body of the dragon vein, because it is an artificial tailed beast and Hyojin himself has the Tenseigan. The dragon vein leaving Hyojin's body will not endanger Hyojin's life. The dragon vein that was freed from the shackles of Suijin's body rapidly expanded in the air, and after a while, its size was so huge that it almost covered the entire sky above the valley. Looking at the dragon vein that was as fat as a ball in the air, Miko-sama, who was hiding in the distance, was a little stunned. She never expected the dragon vein to look like this. From the corner of his eye, Hyojin noticed Miko-sama's surprised expression and felt a little awkward. Seal. Therefore, Hyojin immediately made a hand seal and tried to seal the dragon vein into the gourd. Fortunately, the dragon vein's origin was muddled and did not know how to resist, so it was soon sucked in by the small gourd like a deflated balloon. After completing the seal, Hyojin heaved a sigh of relief. At this moment, Miko-sama walked over and stared at the small gourd. "Why does it look like?" Hyojin quickly explained. "This is an accident." Miko-sama chuckled and said, "I didn't expect you to be so childish. If Zun sees it, she will definitely like it." Hyojin did not explain further. Instead, he lowered his head and pretended to check the small gourd. After sealing the dragon vein into the small gourd, as long as he wore the small gourd on his body, Hyojin could still borrow the dragon vein chakra anytime and anywhere. Therefore, he could still be considered a human pillar of the dragon vein. However, because of the additional layer of the gourd, the efficiency of borrowing the dragon vein chakra was not as high as before, and the danger was slightly increased. However, fortunately, the small gourd was a treasure. Coupled with the sealing technique of the Miko-sama, the probability of the dragon vein going berserk was still within an acceptable range for Hyojin. As long as he did not overuse the dragon vein's chakra in a battle or completely release the dragon vein, The probability of the dragon vein going berserk was still very low. Seeing that the small gourd was only the size of 2 fists, which was about the size of a kettle, Hyojin took out a thin rope and wrapped the small gourd around his waist. After solving the problem of the dragon vein, Hyojin said to Miko-sama, "It's all thanks to you this time. Give me the information about the Acheron cult. I'll help you eliminate them now." Miko-sama took out a scroll and handed it to Hyojin. Chapter 152. Hyojin put away the scroll and said, "Your Highness, please rest assured, I will solve this problem as soon as possible. The cult of Yomi that is entrenched in the land of demons is not very strong. Even the leader of Yomi is only at the level of a jonin. With Hyojin's current strength, coupled with the information collected by Miko-sama, eradicating the cult of Yomi will be a piece of cake. The only thing that needs to be paid attention to is to avoid any fish that slip through the net during this purge." Miko-sama jokingly said, "In fact, I was going to issue a formal commission to your Mai, but this time I happened to meet you. It can be considered as saving the commission for the land of demons." Hyojin was still thinking about his experiment, so he didn't talk much. After sending Miko-sama back to the palace, he immediately rushed towards one of the strongholds of the cult of demons, Mount Miyaboku. As Jiraiya walked, he said loudly, "Boss, why did you summon me in such a hurry? What's the matter? The village is in a standoff with the Cloud Village at this time. I don't have time to accompany you." Fukasaku Sage jumped on Jiraiya's shoulder and knocked his head heavily. "Of course, there's something important that I want to talk to you about." Jiraiya rubbed his head and asked, "What is it?" Fukasaku Sage shook his head and said, "I don't know. It seems to be related to the Child of Prophecy. You will know when you meet the Great Sage." Oh! As soon as he heard that it was related to the Child of Prophecy, Jiraiya immediately became serious. In the prophecy of the Great Toad Sage, there will be a great change in the shinobi world in the future, and the person who will promote the change is the Child of Prophecy. Therefore, the Child of Prophecy can be said to be a key figure in the fate of the entire shinobi world. In recent years, Jiraiya has been traveling around the shinobi world. In addition to his natural desire to be bound, there is also the Child of Prophecy mentioned in the prophecy of the Great Toad Sage. Not long after, Jiraiya followed Fukasaku Sage to the hall where the Great Toad Sage was worshipped. Immortal Fukasaku jumped in front of Great Toad Immortal. "Great Immortal, little Jiraiya is here." Great Toad Immortal squinted his eyes and smiled. "Little Jiraiya is here?" Jiraiya asked anxiously. "Great Immortal, have you found the prophecy child?" Great Toad Immortal shook his head. Jiraiya was a little disappointed. "Then why did you call me here?" Great Toad Immortal seemed to be recalling something. After a while, he slowly said, "Not long ago, there was a change in the prophecy. I saw a person with sky-blue eyes in the future." Jiraiya immediately perked up. "Is he the child of the prophecy?" Great Toad Immortal shook his head again. "I'm not too sure either, but he never appeared in my previous prophecies." "Sky-blue eyes?" After a pause, Jiraiya frowned and said, "Great Immortal, are there any other clues? Just based on the sky-blue eyes alone, it's too difficult to find him." Great Toad Immortal said slowly, "He is wearing the forehead protector of your My Village. You should have said it earlier. It would have been much easier to find him." Jiraiya laughed and turned around, ready to leave. Fukasaku hurriedly stopped Jiraiya. "Little Jiraiya, don't be in such a hurry. Great Immortal hasn't finished yet." Jiraiya had no choice but to go back and sit cross-legged, staring straight at Great Toad Immortal. The Great Toad Immortal recalled and said, "After that, the person with sky-blue eyes never appeared again in the prophecy, not even once." Jiraiya frowned, and a thoughtful expression appeared on his face. If the person with sky-blue eyes doesn't affect the shinobi world, then he wouldn't have appeared in Great Toad Immortal's prophecy. But since he appeared in Great Toad Immortal's prophecy, it means that he will definitely have an impact on the shinobi world. But if that's the case, why did he suddenly disappear from the prophecy? Sitting on the other side of Great Toad Immortal, Fukusaku Immortal glanced at Great Toad Immortal and muttered, "Great Immortal must have gone senile." Fukusaku Immortal quickly said, "Mother the child, what are you talking about?" Great Toad Immortal smiled carelessly, and then said to Jiraiya, "My prophecy should have been interfered with by some kind of power. The person with sky blue eyes must still be alive, and there should be some kind of power around him that can interfere with my prophecy." Jiraiya thought for a long time and asked, "Great Immortal, when did you first prophesy about him?" Great Toad Immortal recalled, "Not long ago." Jiraiya looked helpless. "How long ago is not long ago?" Great Toad Immortal replied, "Maybe half a year ago, or maybe a year ago." For Great Toad Immortal, who has lived for thousands of years, he is not very sensitive to the passage of time, so he can't remember when he first prophesied about the person with sky blue eyes. Fukusaku Immortal said, "See, I said that Great Immortal is senile." Jiraiya stood up and said, "I understand. If he is really the child of prophecy, I will definitely find him." Jiraiya once thought that Nagato, who has the Rinnegan, would be the child of prophecy, but then he heard the news of Nagato's death, and then he thought that Yondaime Naruto Minato would be the child of prophecy. But in the end, the Yondaime Minato also died inexplicably. Although he was repeatedly frustrated, Jiraiya's determination to find the child of prophecy has never changed. He knows that only by finding the child of prophecy can he ensure the peace of the shinobi world. Boom! With a loud noise, the door crashed to the ground, and a figure slowly walked into the dark hall. Inside the hall, the sect master of the Yellow Springs cult, the man known as Yellow Springs, pointed at the figure that had walked into the hall and shouted, "Who are you? Why are you making an enemy of the Yellow Springs cult?" "Yomi cult." With a light snort, the figure walked forward and said, "Yomi is the resting place of the soul, and you are also worthy of being called Yomi." Yomi looked at the figure with a fierce face and said, "Who are you?" The figure's whole body was hidden in a black cloak, and his face was covered with an evil ghost mask. He looked like an emissary from the underworld. The figure smiled slightly and said, "Who am I? I am Yama, who controls the netherworld." As soon as the voice fell, the figure appeared in front of Yomi with a body flicker technique. So fast. As soon as this thought flashed in Yomi's mind, a familiar figure appeared in his field of vision. "Hey, isn't this my own body? Why can I?" With the rapid rolling of his vision, Yomi's consciousness gradually blurred and finally fell into darkness. Dong! Chapter 153. Looking at Yomi's decapitated body, Hyojin's brows furrowed slightly as he muttered to himself. He died just like that. Although Kuroto has never put Yomi in his eyes, but the performance of Yomi, the leader of Yomi, did surprise him a little, because this kind of strength is simply not up to the standard of Jonin. Is it a substitute? A thought immediately flashed in Hyojin's mind. Wiping out the Yomi cult this time wasn't like completing a bounty mission from the black market. This time, it was to repay the Miko-sama's favor, so he had to take it seriously. Soon, Hyojin activated the Tenseigan, and while observing Yomi's body on the ground, he took out a scroll from his pocket. This scroll was given to him by Miko-sama, and it recorded a lot of information about Yomi, so after some careful comparison, Kuroto confirmed that the body in front of him is indeed Yomi. Glancing at the body one last time, and seeing that the residual chakra reaction in the body has dissipated, Hyojin closed the Tenseigan and then activated the Byakugan to loot the stronghold of Yomi. As expected, after the encirclement and suppression, the Yama didn't have much money left. Even Kuroto, who has the Byakugan, didn't manage to find much money. As soon as he thought about money, Hyojin had a headache. The last few cloning experiments consumed a lot of nutrient solution, and there is not much left in the stock of medicinal herbs, so he must do everything possible to get money. Otherwise, the experiments can't continue. Not far from the stronghold of Yomi, Hiriko, wearing a red cloud robe, stood quietly on a flying behemoth. looking into the distance with a cold gaze. On the side, Shino, also wearing a red cloud robe, sat cross-legged on the back of the flying beast and asked, "Did you also use that forbidden technique on this summoned beast?" The corner of Hiriko's mouth curled up. "What do you think of my masterpiece?" Shino laughed. "With it, it's so convenient to travel." Hiriko seemed to enjoy Shino's compliment, and a proud look appeared on his indifferent face. "This is a chimera that I carefully created using the forbidden technique." Shino's eyes flickered, and he praised, "Your forbidden technique can be called art." Hiriko smiled and asked, "The guy we're looking for this time, is he really as powerful as you say?" Shino put away his smile and said seriously, "That guy's strength is average, but the dark medical ninjutsu he mastered is of great significance to both you and me." Shino, who has been traveling around the shinobi world, has discovered many secrets of the shinobi world by virtue of his innate talent, and Yomi's mastery of the dark medical ninjutsu is one of them. If it was in the past, even if he wanted to use the dark medical ninjutsu, he wouldn't be able to. But now that he has joined the mysterious Akatsuki, he discovered that with the help of the Akatsuki's power, many of the plans that he couldn't implement before can now be carried out smoothly. That was why the operation to the Yellow Spring cult base was carried out. Listening to Shino's advocacy of the dark medical ninjutsu, Hiriko gradually became interested. In a process of fusion, the chimera technique is too overbearing, and the user's body often has to bear an unusual burden, so he has a very high demand for body transformation. This was because, in theory, no one's body could withstand the burden of the Goei Yuro technique without modifying it. Not long after, the flying behemoth slowly landed in the Yellow Spring cult base. Jumping down from the back of the flying behemoth, Hiriko looked around and said, "It seems that we are a step too late." At this time, in the Yellow Spring cult base, there are corpses lying everywhere, and even the smell of blood has not dissipated. It seems that the battle happened not long ago. Shino's face was gloomy. "Damn it, who did this?" The two then walked into the hall and saw the corpse of Yomi, the leader of the Yellow Spring cult. Hiriko checked and said, "It was cut off by a kunai, clean and neat, without the slightest unnecessary movement." Shino checked and nodded in agreement. "The attacker's strength is very strong. This guy didn't even have the slightest resistance and was easily killed." Whether it is Hiriko or Shino, both have high attainments in the human body structure, so they only need to carefully check and roughly guess the process of Yomi's death. Thinking that he came here in vain, Hiriko's mood became bad. At this time, Shino suddenly picked up Yomi's severed head and put on Yomi's body. Hiriko asked doubtfully, "What are you doing?" Shino suddenly laughed and said, "Don't be fooled by this guy. He is not dead at all." After saying that, Shino used the body regeneration secret technique on Yomi's body. Under the urging of the body regeneration secret technique, the cut on Yomi's neck gradually healed, and then his chest began to rise and fall, and his nostrils began to flow. Yomi spat out a mouthful of turbid air and sat up abruptly. Hiriko looked at the resurrected Yomi with great interest. "Are you Yomi?" Yomi looked warily at Hiriko and Shino, who were wearing red cloud robes, and asked, "Who are you?" Previously, Hyojin's sweeping momentum in the stronghold made Yomi understand that he is not a match for Hyojin. So before Hyojin broke into the hall, he consumed more than half of his chakra and secretly used the dark medical ninjutsu fake death technique. Fake death technique is one of the most mysterious, forbidden techniques in the dark medical ninjutsu. Once it is used, all the vital signs of the caster will disappear, and they will enter a state of suspended animation. As long as the body is not destroyed, it is possible for the caster to recover after a period of time. However, there is no way to resurrect Yomi with his own ability. Because no matter how magical the fake death technique is, there is no way to resurrect a person who is decapitated. So if Hiriko and Shino came a little later, Yomi would have really died. Hiriko said coldly, "Hand over the dark medical ninjutsu, and we may consider letting you go." Yomi, who is in a weakened state, did not hesitate and immediately said, "Okay, I can teach you the dark medical ninjutsu, but you must guarantee my safety." Shino asked curiously, "Who killed you just now?" Recalling Kuroto's figure in a black cloak and a devil mask, Yomi could not help but shudder. His heart palpitated as he said, "He's an evil demon." Hiriko frowned and said, "Humph, what demon? He is just pretending to be a ghost. Tell me, what is his name?" Chapter 154. After returning to the Konoha village, Hyojin immediately went to his laboratory. Now, the dragon vein has been extracted from his body and sealed in the gourd artifact, so he no longer has to worry about the risk of the dragon vein going berserk when he uses his soul descend. At this time, his eyes moved to the 3 generations of Kazekage puppets standing on the side and thought, "The guards in the laboratory can't be lax in the slightest." Almost all of Hyojin's secrets are hidden in this laboratory, so he must ensure the safety of the laboratory. Therefore, he needs to ensure that the 3 generations of Kazekage puppets are always in an active state. But once he uses Soul Descend, his soul will be transferred from the main body to the clone body, and he won't be able to maintain the Tenseigan chakra required by the 3 generations of Kazekage puppets for a long time. After thinking about it, Hyojin decided to give it a try. He wants to seal a large number of Tenseigan chakra in the 3 generations of Kazekage puppets in advance, so that the 3 generations of Kazekage puppets will be able to use it for a long time. This kind of method is not uncommon in the shinobi world. Before the 4 generations of Naruto and his wife died, they had sealed their remaining chakra in Naruto's body with Fuinjutsu, so that Naruto could survive in times of crisis. And Orochimaru also used the method of sealing chakra in other people's bodies as a backup for his own resurrection. Hyojin is a very action-oriented person. Once he has an idea, he will try it immediately. Coming to the front of the 3 generations of Kazekage puppets, he pressed his right hand on the chest of the 3 generations of Kazekage puppets, and a huge amount of Tenseigan chakra flowed along his right hand into the 3 generations of Kazekage puppets. In an instant, the 3 generations of Kazekage puppets emitted a burst of green light. 4 symbols seal. Sensing that the chakra's amount was almost enough, Hyojin immediately cast the sealing spell. With the completion of his sealing technique, an ink-colored sealing technique appeared on the chests of the 3 generations Kazekage puppets and quickly shrank, eventually converging into a palm-sized sealing technique on their chests. Hyojin asked casually, "How do you feel?" 3 generations of Kazekage puppets felt it and replied, "Master, if there is no fighting, this chakra can last me for 3 months." Hyojin nodded. Although 3 months of standby time was not considered long, it was more than enough for Hyojin. As for how long the 3 generations of Kazekage puppets can last after the battle, no one can estimate at present. After all, different levels of battle consume different amounts of chakra. After dealing with these worries, Hyojin immediately used the Tenseigan's soul descent technique to descend his soul onto the Type A clone. After putting on his clothes, he hung the gourd artifact and grass on his waist. After the pill, Kuroto left the laboratory leisurely. At present, this Type A clone is still far from the perfect water release clone that Hyojin needs. First of all, Hyojin must let this clone completely adapt to his soul, achieving a perfect fit between the body and the soul. This step is crucial. If Suijin can't do it, then there is no essential difference between him and Hiriko's Chimera technique and Hiriko's Chimera technique. Secondly, Hyojin also needs to further develop this water release clone, so that the strength of this water release clone can approach or even reach the level of his Ein release body. The reason why Kuroto did this is so that when he uses the Chimera technique in the future, the 7 clones, including the Ein release body, can achieve a perfect balance of the 7 attributes of chakra. Only in this way can he get a glimpse of the Kekkei Genkai technique. While walking, Hyojin came to Haku's temporary underground residence. Holding a little rabbit in his arms, Haku quickly greeted Kuroto. "Kuroto-sama, You are here. Hyojin gently nodded. Are you used to living here? The little rabbit in Haku's arms was bought by Kuroto at the village market. Kuroto was mainly afraid that Haku would be bored staying alone in the underground residence, so he bought a little rabbit for Haku as a playmate. Haku gently stroked the little rabbit in his arms and nodded repeatedly. Put down the rabbit and go out with me. After saying this, Hyojin turned around and left the underground residence. After settling down the little rabbit, Haku quickly followed and asked, Kuroto-sama, are we going to practice ninjutsu? The corner of Hyojin's mouth twitched. Yes. A few hours later, Hyojin and Haku arrived at a lake in the lower reaches of the Naka River. This place is very far from the village, and it is not within the patrol range, so practicing ninjutsu in this area is relatively safe and hidden. Coming to the lake, looking at the sparkling lake, Hyojin asked, Haku, you should have learned a lot of water-release ninjutsu from Orochimaru, right? I nodded his head in confusion. Hyojin pointed to the lake and said, this place is close to the water source. You can practice all the water-release ninjutsu that you know. Haku has some doubts in his heart before Hyojin asked him to practice ice-release ninjutsu. He doesn't know why Hyojin suddenly wants him to practice water-release ninjutsu. But for Hyojin's request, Haku doesn't dare to refuse, so he held his breath and began to perform water-release ninjutsu. Water release, water bullet technique. In an instant, a few basin-sized water balls gathered on the surface of the lake and then quickly shot into the distance. C-grade water release ninjutsu. Nodding, Hyojin said, continue. Hearing this, Haku once again performed water release ninjutsu. Water release, water chaos wave technique. Water release, water bullet technique. Water release, water dragon bullet technique. Water release, water wall technique. After performing 5 water release ninjutsu in a row, even with the help of the water source in the lake, Haku is still tired and panting. Hyojin glanced at Haku and asked, do you know other water release ninjutsu? Haku answered while panting lightly, I know water wave technique, but I don't have enough chakra now. Water wave technique. Hyojin was slightly startled and immediately said, this technique is the reduced version of the S-class ninjutsu water wave technique developed by Second Sama Naruto. How did you learn it at such a young age? Haku lowered his head and replied, in Orochimaru Sama's place, if I can't learn ninjutsu, I won't have dinner. Hyojin smiled and did not say anything. According to Orochimaru Sama's temper, not giving him dinner is really a very light punishment, but even such a light punishment allowed Haku to master water release ninjutsu in a short period of time. It can be seen that Haku's talent in ninjutsu is really good. Chapter 155. Converging his scattered thoughts, Hyojin's eyes narrowed as he slowly made hand seals. Water release, water bullet jutsu. Walala. As Hyojin launched his ninjutsu, a large amount of lake water gathered in the air, forming several water bullets with a diameter of 2 meters, and then accompanied by a whistling sound, they were shot into the distance. Haku, who was standing on the side, was stunned. His water bullet jutsu can only condense a few water bullets the size of a basin, but Hyojin can condense a large water bullet with a diameter of more than 2 meters. But this is not the end. Hyojin continued to make hand seals. Water release, water chaos wave. Water release, water bullet jutsu. Water release, water dragon jutsu. Water release, water wall jutsu. Without taking a breath, Hyojin performed the 5 water release jutsu in the same order as Haku. After the effect of the water release jutsu gradually faded, Haku looked at the still noisy lake and the dense water vapor in the air and couldn't help but smile. But Hyojin, who had just performed the water release jutsu, shook his head and muttered to himself, the chakra in my body is still a bit sluggish and the hand seals are not smooth enough. Haku looked at Hyojin with a look of worship. Kuroto-sama, I didn't expect your water-release jutsu to be so powerful. Hyojin chuckled and said, "What's so powerful about it? Didn't you just teach me?" "I taught you?" Haku was stunned for a moment, and then his face was filled with disbelief. "Is this the first time you used water-release jutsu?" Hyojin nodded and said, "Well, this is indeed the first time I used water-release jutsu." Hearing this, Haku was a little confused. Although Bai was young, he had the Ice Escape bloodline, so he was very sensitive to the water elemental chakra. He could clearly feel the terrifying water elemental chakra on Hyojin's body. It stands to reason that a ninja with such a huge water attribute chakra should be very familiar with water-release ninjutsu, even if his most powerful method is not water-release ninjutsu. Hyojin knew that Haku was confused, but he did not explain. Instead, he ordered, "Follow me." With that, Hyojin stepped on the water and walked towards the center of the lake. Haku took a deep breath and carefully treaded on the water to keep up with Suijin. Stepping on water was not a difficult task for Bai, who possessed the Ice Escape bloodline. However, he was still young and did not have a strong personality, so he lacked confidence in everything he did. In the upper reaches of the Naka River, Itachi was carrying a backpack and hiking along the bank of the Naka River. As he grew older, he became more and more aware of the conflict between the clan and the village. Especially after the betrayal of Uchiha and Shinichi, there seemed to be no room for reconciliation between the clan and the village. The only one who worked hard between the two was Uchiha Jishue. Perhaps it was because they were afraid of Jishue, the owner of the Manjikyu Sharingan, that both the Uchiha clan and the village restrained some of their hostility. But everyone knew that Jishue could not suppress this rift forever. Itachi was hiking and thinking. He was thinking about the future of the Uchiha clan, because in the eyes of his Sharingan, it seems that between Uchiha and the village, one side is bound to go to destruction. Boom! Suddenly, there was a roar in the distance. Itachi looked in the direction of the sound. A hazy mist appeared on the horizon in the distance. Under the illumination of the sunlight, it reflected a colorful rainbow. So beautiful! Looking at the rainbow in the sky, Itachi, who was depressed, had a rare smile on his face. Is someone fighting by the lake? But soon, he realized that someone was performing ninjutsu in the distance, so he quickened his pace and wanted to get closer to take a look. But before he could take a few steps, there was another loud noise in the distance. Then, the birds in the forest also flew away. Itachi immediately realized that something was wrong and quickly jumped to a big tree. Swoosh! Not long after, a huge wave surged over, almost drowning the entire forest. Itachi was shocked. It was hard for him to imagine who could have such a huge chakras amount and perform such a terrifying water release ninjutsu. In his current understanding, the only person who could do this seemed to be the late second leader Naruto. In the middle of the lake, Hyojin sighed and thought. After adding Haku's cells, the water element chakra affinity of this clone is really terrifying. Unlike Suijin, who was standing quietly on the violently undulating water, Haku, who was standing on the side, was in deep thought. At this time, Haku only had a terrified expression on his face. His body was barely supporting on the violent waves, and his brain seemed to have stopped thinking. He never expected that Hyojin could be so terrifying when he went all out. Pitter patter patter, at this time it was raining cats and dogs. Haku looked up at the sky and realized that the sun that was originally hanging high in the sky was now only a blurry halo. Layers of water vapor filled the air, making the entire sky gloomy. Hyojin looked around and said to himself, seems like I've gone overboard. This water release clone of his had an unparalleled water element chakra affinity. In addition, he had the support of the dragon vein to provide chakra. Moreover, he was in the center of the lake, and there was a large amount of water available for him to use. Therefore, the full power of the water release ninjutsu was so powerful that even he did not expect it. Noticing that the whole lake had become much shallower, he realized that he had really gone overboard this time. Such a big movement might even alarm the village. Therefore, he did not hesitate anymore and immediately carried Haku, who was still in a daze. His body swayed and disappeared into the lake. Not long after, Itachi arrived at the lake. Seeing that the water level of the lake had dropped a lot, and the surroundings of the lake were wet, and the sun was shining brightly in the sky, his expression suddenly became serious. At this time, another 4 figures landed by the lake. They were the Umbu who rushed over after hearing the news. After looking at Itachi for a while, the Umbu captain asked, "Are you a member of Uchiha?" Itachi replied politely, "I am Itachi Uchiha." Without waiting for the Umbu captain to ask, Itachi told him everything he knew. After listening to Itachi's story, the Umbu captain looked a little nervous. Judging from a situation at the scene, it seems that a fierce battle had just taken place here, and the 2 sides that fought should be extremely powerful ninjas. At least, ordinary Jonin can't cause such a scene. The current Konoha is already in troubled times, and now such a thing happened. It really makes people feel uneasy. Chapter 156. After sending Haku back to the underground residence, Hyojin returned to his laboratory. Kuroto was very satisfied with this time's water release ninjutsu, at least in terms of affinity with the water attribute chakra. This clone has reached the standard. While recording the various data of this clone, Kuroto planned the next step of his plan. For some reason, the cloning of the water clone went unexpectedly smoothly. Perhaps it has something to do with the low rejection between Haku's cell tissue and Suijin's own cell tissue, or it may be that the nature of water chakra is relatively stable. So whether it's cell tissue fusion or cloning, the success rate is surprisingly high. In short, the progress of water release clone has far exceeded Hyojin's most optimistic expectations. The key is the compatibility between the clone and the soul. This point must be grasped well. After recording all the data, Hyojin closed the data log in his hand thoughtfully. In fact, the compatibility between the body and the soul needs to be tempered. Simply put, it requires Hyojin's soul to stay in this clone for a long time. Only after a long period of running in can the soul achieve perfect compatibility with the body. This is also the reason why Hyojin wants to reseal the dragon vein sealed in the Een body into the gourd artifact. Because once his soul leaves the Een body for a long time, the dragon vein sealed in his Een body will lose the suppression of the Tenseigan chakra and become a time bomb. And according to Hyojin's preliminary estimation, if he wants to achieve perfect compatibility between the body and the soul, his soul must stay in the clone for 3 years or even more. Such a running-in period is obviously too long. With this running-in period, it will take at least 18 years for Hyojin to obtain the water clone, fire clone, earth clone, wind clone, lightning clone, and yang clone with different attributes of chakra. Spending 18 years to reach the highest level of the shinobi world, Kekkei Jinkai Net, doesn't seem to be too long. However, according to the memories of his previous life, the Fourth Shinobi World War will break out about 14 or 15 years later, so he doesn't have 18 years to slowly get used to it. Considering the butterfly effect, it might not even take 14 or 15 years. I have to think of a way to speed up the process. Rubbing his chin, Hyojin began to think. In addition to the painstaking work that was accumulated over a long period of time, Hyojin believed that intense battles might also be an effective way to improve the compatibility between his physical body and soul. This was because both the physical body and the soul were circulating at high speeds during the intense battle. Such a high-speed circulation would undoubtedly speed up the integration of the physical body and the soul, allowing the two to achieve perfect harmony. But in the shinobi world, there is no shortage of fighting. Having made up his mind, Hyojin began to plan the next step of his plan. The fighting style of the Water Escape Avatar was completely different from the Een Escape Avatar, so it didn't seem appropriate to continue using the Een Escape Avatar as Yama. Thus, he equipped himself with a new black cloak and prepared a mask with a water pattern drawn on it. After putting on a new black cloak and the mask, Hyojin, who was controlling the clone A, came to the mirror and muttered to himself, "Since it's water clone, then I'll call a Tenseigan." After leaving a shadow clone in the village, Tenseigan snuck out of the village with the identity of Tenseigan. 1 week later, Tenseigan kicked the corpse at his feet and frowned. In order to seek a fierce battle, he used the identity of Tenseigan to accept a seemingly difficult bounty mission from the black market. As a result, when he found the target, he found that this guy was only at the level of a chunin. Even if Tenseigan was controlling the water clone at this time, it only took him 2 or 3 moves to finish the battle. Tenseigan spat lightly and said, "TSK, what kind of jonin is he? He's obviously only at the level of a chunin." The bounty mission clearly indicated that the other party's identity was a defected jonin from the Kusanagi village, so it can be seen that he's just a jonin from a small village. Bang, at this time, a burst of white smoke rose. The familiar orange figure of Kasai appeared in front of Tenseigan and stretched out its front paw lazily. "Meow, 1,000 Rio. Thank you." Tenseigan's face darkened. "Can't you change your opening line?" Kasai hesitated for a moment, and finally seemed to have made up his mind and said, "Okay, but I have to pay more." "Then forget it. I suddenly found that I quite like your opening line." As he said that, Tenseigan handed over the money, then took the scroll and opened it. The mysterious person that the organization is looking for has not been found. Recently, the organization has been eyeing a bounty ninja called Yama. I heard that this guy is very mysterious. Even with the power of the organization, after investigating for a long time, they haven't found any clues. But I think, how strong can a bounty ninja be? How can a strong person be a bounty ninja? Tenseigan, who was planning to exchange the body of the Kusanagi ninja at his feet for bounty money in the black market, had a dark expression on his face. He took a deep breath and said, "This bastard. Forget it. I'll make him pay in the future." After sending away the greedy Kasai ninja, Tenseigan sealed the body of the Kusanagi ninja in a storage scroll and then went to the nearest black market. After handing the body to the person in charge of the black market, Tenseigan said, "Give me the bounty book." The boss of the black market handed over the bounty book and carefully asked, "Master, what is your relationship with Lord Yama?" Because the two identities of Yama and Master were wearing the same black cloak, only the masks on their faces were different, so the boss of the black market asked this question. After all, Yama was a famous figure in the black market recently. Tenseigan looked through the bounty book and answered casually, "Yama is our leader." The boss of the black market immediately became more attentive. Even a ninja village would not dare to take a group of powerful ninjas lightly, let alone the boss of the black market who lived a bloody life. Moreover, the strength of Yama had been recognized by the black market circle. So in the face of Master, who belonged to the same organization as Yama, the boss of the black market naturally did not dare to neglect the slightest. At this moment, Tenseigan, who was looking through the bounty book, stopped. He felt a strong chakra reaction approaching him, so he turned his head and looked outside. Chapter 157. Akatsuki's People. Tenseigan was a little surprised. He didn't expect that just after Shinichi informed him that Akatsuki is looking for Yama, he would run into Akatsuki's people. After thinking for a moment, Tenseigan turned around and walked out of the black market, standing quietly on the street. At this time, the two Akatsuki members wearing the Red Cloud suit also stopped in their tracks and confronted Tenseigan, who was wearing the black cloak. The pedestrians on the street immediately noticed Tenseigan and the two Akatsuki members. Whether it's the Akatsuki members wearing red cloak and black cloak, or Tenseigan wearing black cloak and water powder mask, they don't look like good people, so the pedestrians quickly avoided them in 2s and 3s. Not long after, the previously bustling street became silent. The two Akatsuki members took off the black cloak on their heads at the same time, and one of them asked Tenseigan, "Are you the bounty ninja Yama?" Looking at the two people in front of him, Tenseigan chuckled and said, "You are looking for the wrong person. I am Tenseigan." Among the two Akatsuki members, Tenseigan is more familiar with one of them. He is Kakuzu, who claimed to have fought against the Hashirama. The other person is an ordinary-looking uncle. Although Hyojin searches memory, he can't remember who he is. In Hyojin's impression, there is no such person in the Akatsuki. Kakuzu said in a deep voice, "Suijin? Humph, are you playing with me?" Hearing Kakuzu's words, Suijin immediately understood that Kakuzu must have grasped the facial features of his Yama disguise, so he pointed at the mask on his face and said in a mocking tone, "Look carefully, I am Suijin, not Yama, but if you have any request, you can look for me." Another Akatsuki member whispered in Kakuzu's ear, "The pattern on his mask is indeed different from that Yama. They should be from the same organization." Kakuzu's attitude was still calm, and he ordered Hyojin in a condescending tone, "Tell me the whereabouts of Yama and the intelligence of your organization." Kakuzu knows very well how many monsters there are in his organization, so he doesn't put other organizations in his eyes, not even the 5 great shinobi villages in his eyes. Hyojin shrugged. "Come on, grab me, and you'll know everything," Jiao Du coldly said. "You are courting death." Hyojin did not waste any more time. He immediately turned around and sped out of the town. There were many civilians in the town, and if they fought here, even if Hyojin deliberately controlled it, he was afraid that many innocent people would be hurt, so he wanted to lead Akatsuki's team out of the town. Kakuzu was a prominent figure in the black market circle, and he also didn't want to affect the black market because of the battle, so he tacitly followed Hyojin out of the town. Swish, at this time, the Akatsuki member with a long sword rushed over. Hyojin immediately made a hand seal and stamped his foot. Water release. Water wall. In an instant, a water wall rose from the ground and blocked the Akatsuki member who rushed towards Hyojin. At the same time, a hand passed through the water wall and grabbed the Akatsuki member's throat, and then a water prison covered the Akatsuki member. The whole process only took a few breaths, and Hyojin captured one of the Akatsuki members. The process was so smooth that even he couldn't believe it. Suddenly, the light around him dimmed, and a dazzling electric current shot towards Hyojin. Subconsciously, Suijin placed the Akatsuki member who was trapped in the water prison technique in front of him. ZZ, in the harsh sound of the electric current, Hyojin and the Akatsuki member were hit by the lightning release ninjutsu. Supporting his paralyzed body, Hyojin jumped back and landed on a big tree. Looking at the Akatsuki member directly hit by the lightning release ninjutsu, Hyojin lightly spat. "TSK, you are so cruel to your own people." Chapter 158. Listening to Kakuzu's cold and ruthless words, Suijin suddenly remembered that Kakuzu seemed to have changed partners several times in the Akatsuki organization, and it wasn't until he met Fei Dan, who had the immortal body, that they officially formed a stable immortal duo. Even if he sneaks into the Akatsuki organization, he can't escape the law of the jungle. After sighing in his heart, Hyojin no longer cared about the Akatsuki member on the ground and focused all his attention on Kakuzu. Although the Akatsuki member blocked most of the thunder release ninjutsu, Hyojin was still affected by it. At this time, half of his body was paralyzed. Kakuzu seemed to understand Hyojin's current situation, so he didn't say any more nonsense and directly rushed towards Hyojin. At the same time, the 4-masked monsters scattered around Kakuzu also spread out and surrounded Hyojin. Hyojin immediately made a hand seal and shouted, "Water release, great waterfall technique." Walala, as Hyojin activated his ninjutsu, in an instant, a huge wave smashed towards Kakuzu. Kakuzu's expression changed, and for the first time, he showed an expression of surprise. Obviously, the power of Hyojin's water release ninjutsu is far beyond his expectation. In a place without a water source, even Kakuzu, who has lived for more than 70 years, in his impression, not many people can perform water release ninjutsu of this scale. At this time, a masked monster with red lines opened its mouth toward Hyojin, and a fireball was shot out from the masked monster's mouth like a cannonball. Hyojin didn't make any unnecessary movements, but once again made a hand seal. Water release. Water dragon technique. In an instant, a huge water dragon appeared out of thin air and coiled around Hyojin to protect him. Boom, boom, boom. When the fireballs hit the water dragon, they produced a series of loud noises and stirred up steam that filled the air, filling the air with a thick mist. Bang! Right after that, another wind magic bullet was launched towards Hyojin, blowing away half of the water dragon that was protecting Hyojin. After being cut into two by the wind magic bullet, the water dragon that was protecting Hyojin turned into clear water and dissipated. At this time, Kakuzu jumped onto a tree, broke through the mist, and punched at Hyojin. Hyojin's face darkened, and he took out a kunai to counter the attack. Clang! The kunai, which was forged from fine steel, clashed with Kakuzu's fist, and the sound of metal clashing rang out. Obviously, Kakuzu used Earth Release ninjutsu to strengthen his arms. Hyojin borrowed the force of Kakuzu's punch and leaped back, thinking to himself, "This guy's strength is really great." Kakuzu didn't immediately pursue. Standing in the mist, he stretched out his arms towards Hyojin, who was leaping back. At this time, his arms were separated from his body, connected by mysterious black lines, and quickly shot towards Hyojin, who was still in midair. Hyojin, who was in midair, had nowhere to borrow strength, and couldn't dodge at all. He was caught by the two flying arms, and his throat was tightly gripped. Slowly retracting his arms, he dragged Hyojin to the front of Kakuzu. After completely retracting his arms, Kakuzu grabbed Hyojin's neck with one hand, lifted him into the air, and said indifferently, "Boy, your strength is not weak. Tell me all the information about Yama, and I can spare your life." Hyojin, who was desperately struggling, suddenly stopped and chuckled. "You guess, will I spare your life?" Kakuzu's expression stagnated. "No." Boom, boom, boom. Before Kakuzu's voice fell, a series of violent explosions occurred on Hyojin's body. Kakuzu flew out of the explosion awkwardly, coughing while looking for Hyojin's figure. At this time, Hyojin leisurely walked out from behind a big tree. "Oh, such a close-range explosion didn't kill you. Your life is really not ordinary. Using the water clone as bait and using the detonation talisman to deal with me. Humph, it seems that I underestimated you." Eyes staring at Hyojin, Kakuzu continued. "When the mist rose, you used the mist to block my vision and secretly used the water clone." Hyojin smiled. "You guessed right." Kakuzu's eyes became sharper. "Very good. I want to see what other tricks you have." At this time, Kakuzu could already be sure that Hyojin deliberately used the water dragon technique to block his fire release. The purpose was to create the mist and then launch the water clone as a bait. It could be said that from the beginning, he had been played by Hyojin in a cave in the country of fire. Uchiha Shinichi and Pipa Juzo were sitting in front of a bonfire, warming themselves. Stretching, Uchiha Shinichi complained, "Making us look for the mysterious person all over the world, but we don't even know what the mysterious person looks like. Don't you think this is ridiculous?" Pipa Juzo leaned against the rock wall, closed his eyes, and pretended to sleep. For Uchiha Shinichi's complaints, Pipa Juzo did not respond at all. He seemed to have long been accustomed to all this. Suddenly, a spiritual message was transmitted to the minds of both of them. Uchiha Shinichi curled his lips and said, "Why are you looking for us?" Pipa Juzo didn't say much, immediately made a hand seal, and said in a low voice, "Magic Lantern Body Technique, connect." In an instant, Pipa Juzo and Uchiha Shinichi's spiritual projection entered a huge cave. In this cave, there was a very large human-shaped stone statue. The stone statue's face was very distorted, and there were 9 closed eyes on the face. It looked very strange. After the spiritual projection fell on one of the stone statue's fingers, Uchiha Shinichi looked around. However, through his previous observation, Hyojin has already discovered that the four masked monsters that separated from Kakuzu's body, although they can fly and run, they can't get too far away from Kakuzu's body. Therefore, according to the position of the four masked monsters, Kuroto can roughly infer where Kakuzu's body is. It's just that at this moment, Hyojin has no interest in continuing to entangle with Kakuzu. Since Kakuzu has sneaked into the ground, he decided to take this opportunity to escape from the battle. Suddenly, he felt several huge chakra reactions coming towards him. He immediately activated the Byakugan, 1 to 4, a total of 4 people. And with such chakras amount, it seems that all 4 of them are experts. The speed of the other party was extremely fast, and when Hyojin noticed them, they were already close to him. Not long after, the 4 figures landed around Hyojin and surrounded him. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.